Good evening, everyone. If you could please get seated, and we'd like to get started here. I will start this evening with the land acknowledgement. The West Hollywood Planning Commission acknowledges that the land on which we gather and that is currently known as the City of West Hollywood is the occupied, unceded, seized territory of the Gabrielino Tonga and Gabrielino Quiche peoples. It is now 6:32, and I would like to call this meeting to order. And with that, we'd like to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Commissioner Jones, could you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you. Item 3, roll call. Secretary Gillig, may we please have roll call?
Thank you and good evening. Commissioner Solomon. Here. Commissioner Matos.
Present.
Commissioner Jones.
Here.
Commissioner Hoopengarner.
Present.
Commissioner Carvalero.
Here.
Vice Chair Gregoire.
Here.
Chair Lombardi.
Present.
And we have a full 7-member quorum.
Thank you. Item number 4 is approval of the agenda. Are there any requests for modifications to the agenda this evening?
Yeah, I'd like to modify
Okay.
the agenda if everybody agrees. I'd like to move item 10A to go after item 10D. So the order would be 10B, 10C, 10D, 10A, because I need to recuse myself from item 10A.
Okay, and just to confirm, you want that to go last, right? So I think it would be after item 10D.
At the end of the public hearings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I also would like to note that we do have a request to continue one item, so if we can also vote on the continuation of that as part of this, just want to note that now.
Which item?
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
And I heard I heard a request from Commissioner Matos on the item. So just for the record, it would be to continue item 10C 7748 Santa Monica Boulevard, 1054 North Janice Avenue to a date uncertain as part of that motion.
Perfect. Yeah, and so I'll second that.
Thank you.
Great.
And do we have a motion?
We have a motion and we have a second, seconded by Commissioner Matos.
Motion from Commissioner Caballero, second from Commissioner Matos.
Okay, thank you. And the motion carries unanimously, approving the agenda for Thursday, November 7th, 2024, as amended.
Thank you. Item 5, approval of the minutes. And we're requesting the approval of the October 17th minutes.
I move approval.
Okay.
I will
Moved
second.
So moved by the Vice Chair and seconded by Commissioner Matos.
And the motion carries, noting 6 ayes, 1 abstention by Commissioner Jones, approving the minutes for October 17th, 2024 as presented.
Thank you. Item 6, public comment.
Okay, Chair, we have one in council chambers. Mayor Erickson.
I promise none of you, well, maybe one of you is in trouble, but we'll see. No, I just wanted to come and say hello. I have made it to every commission and advisory board, but I never came to this one. And I realized that today as I was grabbing coffee, and it's so great to see you all. We have a lot going on throughout our world right now, and I'm really thankful that we have dedicated individuals who are here to uplift housing, uplift all that we do to beautify our community, and for the most part, most of you building more affordable housing in the city. So it's been really, really wonderful to really walk around our city in the last 2 months and talk to people who want more affordable housing. They want denser buildings and they want taller buildings. And they want buildings that people can live in and afford to live in. And I know that most of you up here are doing that and are fighting for that. And it's really great to see the dedication of this commission, first and foremost, to the residents of this city. So I just wanted to come say thank you, thank you, thank you. I know it's November and it was always hard to get over here, but I'm so glad I was in the area this time to make sure we are doing it, because all of you are making sure that your vision of the city is moving forward, and the moving forward vision of the city is progressive, it's more affordable, and it's more housing for all. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful commission hearing. And I'm leaving before your public hearing starts, so I don't have to recuse myself at another time when it comes to the City Council. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That's all we have.
Thank you. Okay, that moves us to item number 7, the director's report.
Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the West Hollywood Planning Commission. Nick Marisich, Director of Community Development. I do have a few items to report on tonight. First, at their meeting on October 21st, the City Council approved the zone text amendment to enable the issuance of demolition permits for vacant properties that pose public safety risk. This is an item that was recently heard by the Planning Commission. The item returned to the Council for second reading on November 4th and will take effect early next month. Also at their meeting on October 21st, the Council approved the scheduling of the joint study session with the Planning Commission for early next year to discuss the review process for future development agreements, including the Planning Commission's role in the review process, as well as the city's public benefits policy. The Council scheduled this joint meeting for Monday, February 24th, 2025, and we hope that you can all participate. Next, I would like to remind you all about West Hollywood's 40th anniversary celebration, which will take place the evening of Thursday, November 21st at the Pacific Design Center. This event will mark the 40 years since the city's incorporation in 1984. It is a citywide celebration, and we have canceled the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting for that date so that everyone can participate. The event is free to attend and open to the public, but please RSVP in advance at www.weho.org/WehoDay. Finally, I'd like to announce some exciting news on the staffing front. Jennifer Alkire was recently selected to fill the previously vacant position of Assistant Director of Community Development, and that was effective October 28th. In this role, Jennifer is responsible for the day-to-day operations of the department's programs across the divisions and will work alongside the director to ensure continuous alignment with the department's long-term vision. Jennifer, as many of you know, joined the city back in 2007. She served his roles as associate planner, senior planner, planning manager, most recently since 2019 for the current and historic preservation planning division. So thank you for joining me and congratulating her on this well-deserved promotion. We are going through the selection process for a planning manager to replace Jennifer's prior role. And so during that time, we'll have staff rotating through this position in an acting capacity. And first up is Senior Planner Doug Vu, who's with us tonight. And he'll be filling this role for approximately the next month. That concludes my report for tonight. I always want to acknowledge we know you're all volunteers and want to thank you for your service to the community. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and congratulations, Jennifer. It's so nice to have you here and for all of your years of service, so I'm very excited for you. I do have one question for our Community Development Director. Just to confirm, Monday, February 24th at 6 p.m. would be the joint session?
That's
and
correct.
Do we have a location?
And the location, I believe, will be here in Council Chambers.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for our Community Development Director? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is item 8, consent calendar, and we have one item on consent calendar. Do we need to formally vote on this item?
It's technically approved by when you motion for the agenda to be approved, but if you like, we can do a roll call vote for it.
Okay. Is everyone okay by consensus, if that's sufficient?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair, actually, if we could do just a vote on the calendar, that would be best. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah, you'd like a formal vote on the consent calendar. Okay, then would anyone like to motion? Okay, motion by the Vice
I
Chair.
will second.
Stereo. I think I heard Commissioner Matos first, so seconded by Commissioner Matos.
And the motion carries unanimously with 7 ayes. This is approving the consent calendar for 8383 Santa Monica Boulevard. It is a receive and file.
Thank you. Item number 9, public hearing, Section 1, project subject to the Housing Accountability Act, and we have no items this evening. Item 10A, we will continue to later today, so that means we will start with our first public hearing of the evening, which is item 10B, 617-2621 North Robertson Boulevard. And this is a hearing to consider the determination of general plan consistency for the proposed rehabilitation and development for recovery-related services and public parking uses at the mentioned address on Robertson Boulevard, West Hollywood, California.
I'm sorry, Chair, to interrupt, but we may have missed something on the agenda.
Yes.
Commissioner Cavallaro, item 11A is about the scheduling for the next year. And you're okay to miss that? Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's always good to double check.
That you weren't being excluded from that conversation.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, I meant to note that before. I appreciate that. So with that being said, if we can go with item 10B, and I believe we have a staff report.
Good evening. Good evening, Chair, Vice Chair, and Commissioners. My name is Casey Conley, Associate Planner with the Current and Historic Preservation Division, and this is the presentation. Sorry, I can't. Sorry, I have a pregnant belly. I can't get much closer. I think that works. Can you all hear me now? Okay, thank you. This is a presentation for the general plan consistency application for the uses located at 617 to 621 Robertson Boulevard. What is under review by the Commission tonight is whether the proposed uses, recovery-related services, and public parking lot are in compliance with the general plan. Could maybe help, some help? There we go. The property is located on the west side of Robertson Boulevard in the commercial neighborhood 2 zone of the city and the Melrose Beverly sub-area, surrounded by commercial on all sides with the West Hollywood Park to the east and separated from residential by Melrose Avenue to the south. The property currently contains a one-story building constructed in 1936 in the log-style cabin for the Boy Scouts of America. It was purchased from the city of Beverly Hills in April 2022 with the requirements that its long-term use be for recovery services. In June 2023, the City Council approved a contract with Lahire Architects for design of the project. The City Council and the Public Facilities Commission both reviewed the design concept of the project prior to final design review and approval by the Historic Preservation Commission. The only required public design review fell to the Historic Preservation Commission through a certificate of appropriateness to determine compliance with the Secretary of the Interior standards because the property is an identified historic resource. It was identified in the 2016 Commercial Historic Resources Survey as eligible for listing in the National Register, California Register, and for designation as a West Hollywood cultural resource. In June 2024, HPC approved the certificate of appropriateness for the rehab of the log cabin, as well as the new development. During the meeting, the Commission did ask for some clarity on the plans, but overall approved the design compatibility, separation of the new buildings from the resource, and the new massing. The commission requested that further research be conducted regarding the decorative metal straps on the entry door, a compatible stucco color, preservation of the original window openings, and relocation of the dedication stone, and initiation for local designation of the property by the city. The proposed use will be for the long-term lease between the West Hollywood Recovery Center and the city for use as recovery-related services. The nonprofit currently functions out of the log cabin and the Worley building, and this project will retain the character and significance of the log cabin while expanding the site to accommodate the West Hollywood Recovery Center's operation into one site instead of multiple sites throughout the city. This supports the city's goals of providing social services to residents in need by making it convenient and functional to the provider and the users. Though design review is not part of the review scope for the commission this evening, the project plans were provided to give concept of what is being proposed. Key items in the updated plan set that were sent are the proposed square footage of the 3 new buildings. This is being reduced by about 900 square feet from that first plan set to the second one that was sent. Clarification to the location of the proposed vines on the landscape plan. These will just be on the front walls on Robertson Boulevard and not on the wood trellises. And then the asphalt painted parking lot is now colored concrete pavers. It also added the items requested by HPC, like the earth tone stucco color, the retention of the historic window openings, and the location of the dedication plaque. The project includes the retention of the log cabin with rehab of the noted character-defining features in the staff report, the construction of the 3 new structures, a new meeting room, a bathroom structure, and a small office, totaling about 2,500 square feet, will support the West Hollywood Recovery Center's use. Site improvements include replacing the existing pavement with color concrete pavers, new ADA access to the site, communal seating areas, and new landscaping. A number of new trellises are also included throughout the site, and some will include solar panels. This is an interior view of the site from the parking lot facing northwest. As you can see, the use is drawn into the interior of the site with main entrances to the meeting rooms away from the public right-of-way, communal areas near the center of the lot, and gated access to the bathrooms at the rear of the lot. This supports the general plan goal of providing a beneficial community service as appropriate located within the site and would not be a detriment to the surrounding commercial or residential areas. The Planning Commission's review of this project is to determine if the proposed uses are compatible with the city's general plan. Pursuant to Government Code Section 65401, no public works projects shall be constructed unless determined by the Planning Commission to be consistent with the general plan. Additionally, city projects and facilities on property owned, leased, or licensed by the city when used for government purposes are exempt from the zoning ordinance required if determined again by the Planning Commission to be consistent with the general plan. Although the project is not required to comply with the zoning code under this section, the project largely complies in areas such as FAR, height, and setbacks. Staff finds that the proposed uses are consistent with the general plan by furthering the goals and policies outlined on the slide here, including providing progressive, high-quality human services for those who need them, working with local, state, and federal agencies to fund community social services, and providing important community-wide amenities in appropriate locations. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the general plan consistency application and adopt draft resolution number PC 24-1572, including minor revisions on page 2 that update the proposed square footage of the new buildings. And I am happy to answer any questions that you might have on the presentation or the staff report.
Thank you. Do my colleagues have any disclosures at this time? No? Okay. One disclosure. Yes.
This was, I just now realized, I should have maybe checked with staff before, but this was presented about a year ago to the Public Facilities Commission. At that time, I was a member of it. I received the presentation and provided feedback.
Are there any issues? Legal shaking their head no? Okay, thank you. Any other disclosures? Okay. We can ask questions of staff, or we could go to public comment. Any preference here?
Public comment.
Public comment. Questions of staff? Okay. Well, we have at least one person that would like questions of staff first. So on that note, as we jump into questions, I just want to frame what tonight's discussion is about. So my understanding is this project would probably not be coming here to the Planning Commission if it were not for anything other than review of general plan consistency. That's why we're hearing it tonight. Correct?
Correct. Since
Okay.
the property is an identified historic resource, its development required a certificate of appropriateness, and that review went to Historic
Okay.
Preservation Commission.
So if there's any design-related comments, I don't know if we have all of the staff here to answer those, but obviously you can put a comment out there, but I just want to note that that's what we're being asked to do today. They said go to HPC and the Public Facilities Commission, as Commissioner Solomon just noted. But Commissioner Hoopengartner, I think you have some questions you'd like to ask before we go to public comment. So. Okay, does anyone else have questions before we go to public comment?
Can I just ask a point of clarification?
Yes, of course.
So just to be clear, and again, you did frame this up, I think, but I want to make sure I'm grasping. Are we able to provide comments when, like, post-public comment about any notes about the design, or is that off the table here
I
for the
think
purposes of tonight?
I think that if the commission does have comments, the staff would be glad to hear them and take them into consideration.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, I'll hold. Thank
We
you.
just don't have the design team today here presenting or able to answer those questions.
I believe that the architect for the project is not here this evening.
Okay, thank you. Okay, should we go to public comment then?
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, we have no public comments for this item.
Okay, then we're back to questions for staff. Would anyone like to go first? Okay, Commissioner Hoopengartner.
I just concerned about the activation of the space. So my questions are about the new construction on Robertson and that what appears to be designated an office space with the one little tiny window on the street side. Since we don't have the architect here, I'm trying to understand the purpose of having that sort of solid wall right on the street side with a rather nominal little tiny window there.
Brian Ligg, Property Development Manager. Commissioner Hoopengartner, part of the program requirements, I can't speak to the design or the window, but there's an administrator of the facility, and the city and the county, since the county's funding this, needed an office space for providing social services to the recovery community that would be attending the meetings. So we wanted to have a separate office space. I know that doesn't address your concern about the street frontage.
There's different ways to design office space.
I'm just telling you the program requirement.
I understand that.
Yeah,
I can see that on the plans.
Okay.
I'm just trying to understand if there's a design directive that somehow requires that to be a solid wall.
I can't answer that.
Okay. Also, the very large central courtyard, was there anything in the directive from the Historical Commission that prevented any sort of interior planters in that large central courtyard? It seems to have a bit of a heat island effect going on there with all those pavers, and I was wondering if there was there was something in terms of the setbacks or why things had to, if that you're looking at that as an event space, is there any reason why there couldn't be some raised bed planters, maybe even with seating around it, a tree or something that would create some shading and break up that heat island?
I can address that. First and foremost, the city, this is 2 parcels. The city purchased it with parking fund money, and a public parking lot needs to remain on the property.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that, we tried, the design directive was to try to maintain as much public parking by create an event space that could, the meeting rooms could spill out into that event space. But first and foremost, I mean, I think we're losing 6 or 7 parking spaces over what exists today, and we had tremendous pushback on that from the neighboring uses that use the parking space.
So is the intent to use that interior courtyard as parking?
Yes.
I see. Well, then plants would be a problem.
Yeah. And, you know, the trellises and everything else was to try to mitigate the parking lot and the heat and everything else that you addressed, but it's a parking lot.
Okay. And last but not least, I mean, I see that you have solar panels over the parking. Again, as a way to mitigate the heat island, would there be a way to add solar panels to create additional shaded space in the gathering area?
Right now, it's net zero with the solar panels that are on there, and that was the directive. But I understand your comment, and I could certainly bring that back to the design team.
Nothing says we can't be net positive.
I wholly agree. So.
I mean, net zero is nice, but let's go for the gold.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I just have one follow-up question. I just want to note, I believe that there are minimum fenestration or opening requirements for offices in the building code, so that would need to be met for the offices. Yes.
Yes, and we're in plan check. Maybe that window will grow.
Okay. That's what I was getting at. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay. Is there any discussion on the item? Commissioner Matos.
I'd just like to make a few comments. Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited to see this item come before the Planning Commission for general plan consistency finding. I think that this is not only consistent with our general plan, but it is exemplary of our general plan. This facility has been serving our community with sobriety resources and support resources for decades. And we recently saw our state assembly member, who's the Democratic caucus chair, Rick Chavez-Zabur, bring $650,000 in state funding to update this facility, along with Senator Ben Allen, who brought forward $500,000, totaling $1.15 million to have this project done. I want to thank them for that. I'm excited to see the leadership of council bring this to fruition and for this resource to continue serving our community for decades to come. I'm excited to pass this project and make a finding of general plan consistency, and I'd be happy to make the motion when the time is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, thank you. Obviously, I know we're not here to kind of support this, but yes, I'm inclined to go ahead and move this forward. To Commissioner Hoopengarner's point, I did just, you know, and if you could pass these comments along to the design team, it'd be much appreciated. I think to her point about just kind of the window, that articulation on that, I believe it's the southernmost southeast side. And then kind of the structure to the north side, just the kind of the Robertson facing side of that, just want to be mindful of kind of the way that it relates to the street and to the pedestrian experience there, given how much people walk over there and what their experience would be. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Anyone else? No? Commissioner Hoopengarner?
Yeah, I mean, I've lived in this community now for almost 40 years, and this has been an amazing resource, and that's great that we get to keep it. And then not only do we get to keep it, we get to really expand and improve it. So I very much support this in concept. To my questions, I really think that there's ways to really beef up that complementary building and really integrate it better with the project, both aesthetically and as a way to activate the street. Because anybody who's lived here for any minute of a time knows that there's always a crowd out there. It's almost impossible to drive by there and not have, you know, a crowd either coming or going and waiting and talking. And so anything we can do to make that an inviting space, I would strongly encourage. It is one of our most active, if you will, spaces for that exact reason. There's so many people there all the time. So I'm absolutely inclined to support staff's recommendation, and you know, with Commissioner Jones, I think just a few tweaks, we could make this just that much better. Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak? Commissioner Carvalero?
Yeah, I'm excited to see this project come to Planning Commission. I mean, just generally, I feel like it meets the general plan, so I have no issues with that. But from a design point of view, you know, the Secretary of Interior really requires that the existing building, the historic building, be standout and not have the other projects or the other buildings overwhelm it. So the distance between the buildings and actually that elevation towards Robertson with a small window, I understand sort of the idea of having a big window, but then that brings much more attention to that building and takes away from the log cabin. I really like how these trusses kind of pay homage to the log cabin, but don't try to replicate it. We want to have the new buildings stand on their own and not oversize the log cabin. So I think it's really well done, and I'm excited to see this come through.
I would like to clarify that I have no, particular need for a bigger window. I just think that the space can be articulated or activated more so that it's just not a solid wall. And that was my concern. And whether that's a bigger window or another window, or there could be any number of design options. So that was my point, is to way to just not make it a solid wall that as you walked by, it doesn't feel inviting and engaging. And that, however that's done, I will leave up to the designers. But that was my only comment.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it's just my opinion of what I saw.
Chair Lombardi, I had one other comment I wanted to
Yes.
address Commissioner Hoopengardner. This is subject to a public art requirement, and Casey reminded me we're looking at that wall as part of that public art requirement. So,
I was going to say the word mural, but I didn't.
so I think that might
So-
be part of the solution.
Exactly. And like I said, there's a lot of different ways to activate the space.
And they're having that dialogue with the public art team right now.
Okay, any other comments? Commissioner Solomon?
I'll be short. I mean, I'm prepared to move this forward and find consistency with the general plan. And my only comment is just I want to applaud city leadership for working with the assistance of the state and the county to, in 2022, be bold and take action and actually purchase this property. And then immediately, a pretty short timeline, thanks to city leadership and city staff, put this forward and pretty immediately show that the city of West Hollywood will do much more to take care of this building and this community than the city of Beverly Hills did. So I think what's put in front of us tonight is a great building, it's a great resource, and I'm glad that we took action to acquire it and immediately set about improving it.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Okay. I'll just provide a couple of comments as well. So, I mean, in general, I'm very much in support of this item, and in particular as it relates to the general plan. And I was very excited when we first heard this item a few years ago, and the purchase, came over to the city of West Hollywood. It's so nice to see there's improvement happening. Bless you. In terms of the design, I think it's very much on the right track, and there's just, a few comments that I have. I think that there's probably some refinement. We've already discussed some of those, so I hope that moves forward. So without, reiterating too much of that, it's great to get clarification that there may be something happening on that larger facade on the new structure. I was wondering if it would be landscaping, but, mural or art project, that makes sense too. I did think it was a little bit interesting that some of the outdoor area looks like it's sort of uncovered, and there is opportunity to create some shading, but I also see how the massing of that roof could start to compete with the historic log cabin. So I just kind of want to note that in general, that it seemed there was some protection over at the car park, but less so at the outdoor seating areas. And I know that there is a lot of activity and people do enjoy being outside from my observations when I walk or drive by the area. So shade is important. There's different ways to do that. Ensuring that the walls that we see feel softened, which they do in this rendering, is another comment that I had. But in general, I'm in full support of this item and excited to see it move forward. Unless there's any other comments, if someone would like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to move the staff recommendation and find general plan consistency for this item.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Commissioner Mato, seconded by Commissioner Jones. And is there any discussion before we move to vote? No? Okay.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes. We do have an appeal process. The resolution the Planning Commission just memorializes the Commission's final action on this matter. This action is subject to appeal to the City Council. Appeals must be submitted within 10 calendar days from this date to the City Clerk's office. Appeals must be in writing and accompanied by the required fees. The City Clerk's office can provide appeal forms and information about waiver of fees. The appeal process deadline is Monday, November 18th, 2024 at 5 p.m.
Okay, thank you. Item 10C is continued to a date uncertain, which we agreed to when we approved the agenda. So that moves us to item 10D. This is a zone text amendment update for regulations relating to accessory dwelling units and junior accessory dwelling units. And we will now hold a public hearing to consider this zone text amendment to update the regulations and comply with state law. And when ready, we can begin with a staff report.
Good evening, Chair and Vice Chair and Commissioners. Not sure why the screen is not maximized, but my name is Tahira Ferris. I'm a senior planner with Long Range Planning. This evening, I'll be presenting a zone text amendment to update accessory dwelling unit regulations for state compliance. So just a brief agenda. I'll go over the background of why we're here this evening and then go through what those proposed amendments are to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance and staff's recommendation. So there were 2 bills that were signed in late September of 2024 that have the potential to make our accessory dwelling unit null and void if we are not in compliance with those bills by January 1st of 2025. The ordinance before you is planned to go to City Council in December, along with an urgency ordinance, so it would take effect immediately upon adoption by the City Council. While these bills were recently signed, staff was already working on updates to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance. So we actually recently brought an item to the Long Range Planning Project Subcommittee to discuss some local options that we have related to accessory dwelling unit regulations. And so I just want to clarify with you that tonight we are not discussing those local policy options. Those will be in a separate ordinance that's coming next month. So it's on the agenda for December 5th. Tonight is just the state compliance updates. So I'll go into the proposed zone text amendment. So there were 2 bills. So AB 2533 was signed and SB 1211. So currently state law prohibits a local jurisdiction from denying a permit to legalize an unpermitted accessory dwelling unit that was constructed before January 1st of 2018 based on noncompliance of objective development standards. The city cannot require the applicant to fix the noncompliance issue. However, there is one exception to that, where the city can make a finding that the correction of the violation is necessary to protect the health and safety of the public or the occupants of the structure. So AB 2533 expands the existing protections for unpermitted ADUs to include junior accessory dwelling units, JADUs as well, and it also moves the construction cutoff date to January 1st, 2020, and it replaces that one exception that allows the city to deny a permit with a requirement that the city would have to make a specific finding that correcting the violation is necessary to comply with standards that are specified in the Health and Safety Code section 17920.3, which specifically applies to substandard buildings. SB 1211 addresses replacement parking requirements as well as multifamily accessory dwelling units. So existing law prohibits jurisdictions from requiring off-street parking spaces to be replaced when a garage or carport or covered parking structure is demolished in conjunction with an accessory dwelling unit. And local agencies are now also prohibited from requiring uncovered parking spaces that may be demolished with a new ADU from being required to be replaced as well. This state bill also adds a new definition for livable space, which helps cities determine how to consider ADUs that are being converted within multifamily structures that are allowed to be converted within livable space in multifamily units or buildings. And finally, the bill also increases the number of detached ADUs that are permitted on multifamily lots. So currently on a multifamily lot, you could have up to 2 detached ADUs. With this new state law, you can have up to 8 detached ADUs, but no more than however many units are on the lot already. So up to 8, but no more than 8. Just want to point out that that number is not a place where the city has any flexibility. That's written into the state law. With this update, staff is also clarifying how we implement some specific objective standards related to front yard setbacks and FAR in residential zones, as well as some architectural standards to address lighting and line of sight in relation to the placement of doors and windows for consideration of privacy and screening. State law prohibits jurisdictions from referencing other parts of its zoning code when referring to ADU regulations. So we've also duplicated some language from a separate section in our code, section 19.20.080, which includes guidelines on height measurement. And we've added that to the ADU section, so it's clear within that specific section how height should be measured. And then finally, we are actually adding a new entitlement called an ADU permit. Currently, ADUs are approved in 2 methods. The review is either by building permit only review or through a zone clearance. The zone clearance is a ministerial review. However, the state prefers jurisdictions to use an ADU permit actually and prohibits jurisdictions from requiring a separate zone clearance for ADUs. So we are creating this new ADU permit, which is a ministerial review. And so it's just a new code section to codify that. And there's a lot of text on the screen, but I just want to mention that we do have a number of corrections to our ordinance, and I wanted to make sure that those are read into the record. So on the attachment to the resolution, we have changes on page 12, where we are striking the reference to a zone clearance and replacing that with ADU permit. Also on page 12, this is subsection D1A. We're clarifying that the reference is to D1A, so we're adding the letter A there, and we're striking the word above. On page 16, subsection E2C, we are striking language that starts with natural grade may be substituted for existing grade where the community development director determines that the use of the natural grade more accurately serves for the purposes of the zoning ordinance. That is subjective language that would not work in the ADU ordinance, so we're removing that. Oh, I'm sorry. Also on page 19, subsection F1D, we are just striking reference to lot coverage, as lot coverage is not something that's currently addressed in our code, so it's not relevant. And then finally, on page 19, subsection F2, we are just replacing that in its entirety, just for more clarity in relation to setbacks. So just to be clear, where setbacks are required in single-family residential zones or multifamily residential zones. And with that, we will recommend Planning Commission approve the resolution recommending to the City Council approval of our ADU ordinance amending Title 19. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to read the text at the same time here. Some of the changes. Do we have any questions or clarification questions of staff, or did we want to hear from the public first? Yeah? Okay. Secretary Gillig, are there any public comments?
Chair, we have no public comments.
Online or in Zoom? No one?
No.
Okay. Questions for staff then? I have one question, but if Commissioner Solomon would like to go first.
Well, I, like everyone else up here, I think just received this letter from Cal HDF right before the meeting started. I hope I don't know if it's shared with the public in any sort of way, but I don't know that I've had time to absorb it or that anyone else has. I do know that this is a credible legal organization. I mean, they had the landmark case in La Cañada Flint Ridge. So I wanted to give staff a chance to respond to the contents of the letter.
Yeah, I'm happy to do so, and thank you, Commissioner Solomon, for bringing that up. As the Commissioner mentioned, we did receive this letter from Cal HDF about an hour before the hearing. However, our office is familiar with, sorry, let me get this microphone a little. Our office is familiar with the series of arguments they've made because they've been made in other jurisdictions as well. So I can go through those quickly if that's helpful, just for purposes
I think
of
so.
that.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So
I think it should be addressed on the record. Thank you.
absolutely. So the first argument they've made is that deed restrictions are prohibited under state ADU law, and they reference a letter that HCD submitted to the city of San Marino that said the city may not require a deed restriction prior to and as a condition of approval of an ADU building permit application. The city here, West Hollywood's not requiring a deed restriction prior to or as a condition of approval of an ADU building permit, which was the issue in San Marino. The city of West Hollywood in our urgency ordinance is requiring the deed restriction before the certificate of occupancy will be issued. The city's not holding up the issuance of the building permit, and the purpose for that, which we believe is consistent with state law, is just so the city can better track the requirements with that deed restriction at the time of certificate of occupancy. Our office also disagrees with any argument that the deed restriction is counter to black letter law. It is recorded and runs with the land, so the buyer purchases a property understanding those restrictions. The second of three arguments made in the Cal HDF letter is that the city may not require owner occupancy for any ADUs. Our office disagrees with that assertion. The city is not imposing any owner occupancy requirements relative to ADUs after January 1st, 2020, which is when state ADU law took effect that prohibits owner occupancy requirements. So anyone coming in today for an ADU is not subject to an owner occupancy requirement. And finally, the last argument seems to be a policy-based argument that in no instance could the city require a discretionary process for ADUs. We disagree. Certainly if a ADU or a JADU meets the codified state standards or the floor of what's contemplated by state law, then the city can and will issue a ministerial permit. The discretionary process is for ADUs that do not meet those state standards.
Thank you. Are there any questions related to that? Commissioner Solomon, do you have other questions?
No.
I do have one question just to make sure I'm understanding the suggested changes. I think it was page 16 of the attachment to the resolution relating to some number followed by C with the maximum height above grade, maximum allowable height. So you're taking out the very last sentence, but then the diagram, figure 3.2, still shows the following grade. Is that because the first sentence says it shall be measured at the vertical distance from the grade existing at the time? I guess I'm wondering if that diagram needs to be updated, or if you've looked at that, or it makes me wonder what that all means. And I apologize for not being more clear. I'm trying to digest this myself right now.
I think the diagram is in reference to the first part of that section, which we are not striking.
Vertical distance from the grade to an imaginary plane. Number of feet above and parallel to. Okay. I understand. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Any comments?
I'll move approval of staff recommendation.
Okay.
I will second it.
So we have a motion from Vice Chair Gregoire and a second from Commissioner Matos. Is there any further discussion before we move to
And
voting?
just a clarification for the motion maker in the second, that it does incorporate the edits that staff, or corrections or clarifications.
Yes.
Okay, confirm
Thank you.
that it does.
Okay. Thank you. So the motion is with staff's recommended corrections. Are there any other items before we go to vote? Anyone? I do have one quick question. I'm sorry. I had flagged a number in the text earlier. Was that something that was picked up or that was okay? So let me find it. 1 second. It was. It was under D, permitting process, D1A. And it's referencing the very same section, D1. Is that correct? That's correct? Yes.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Thank you for letting me check that. Are there any other questions? Looks like people are voting. I'm going to vote as well.
And the motion passes unanimously with 7 ayes, approving resolution number PC 24-1580 as amended. There is no appeal process. This is a recommendation moving forward to the City Council.
Thank you. Next item is item 10A, and I believe we have one recusal on this item as discussed earlier. Commissioner Carvalero, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, I need to recuse myself from item 10A because I've worked on billboard projects on Sunset Boulevard, and there's a conflict of interest.
Okay. And regarding the calendar items, you're okay, as we noted before?
Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
okay with whatever you agree.
Okay. We'll ask staff if there's any changes that you get updated. Thank you. And we'll wait until Commissioner Carvalero leaves the room. I'll just look for a thumbs up when staff is ready. But item 10A we will be hearing next, 9200 Sunset Boulevard. This is a public hearing regarding a request to permit a new two-faced static billboard and site improvements in front of the subject property in West Hollywood. And just let us know when staff is ready.
Yeah, go.
Good evening, Chair and fellow commissioners. Jennifer Davis, City of West Hollywood Project Planner, Contract Planner. And tonight we are looking at 9200 Sunset Boulevard for a development agreement, a zoning map amendment, and a sign permit for a new billboard project. This billboard project is called the Legacy Loop. It's at 9200 Sunset. It is the last parcel on Sunset as you head out west out of the city. Tonight, the Planning Commission is to review the requested permits and make a recommendation to the City Council for approval or denial. Just to give an overview of the billboard elements, This is a static sign. It's internally illuminated. There's a piece of vinyl on it and it's lit from behind. It's located in the front of the 9200 Sunset office building. The billboard is remotely dimmable, and the change of the vinyl face is limited to 28 days, a 28-day rotation. That is to minimize any disruption on Sunset Boulevard. There are two faces on this billboard, both facing east. The top of it is 500 square feet, and the lower loop is 1,000 square feet. From grade to top of sign, it's 100 feet. The project does include substantial improvements to the site with plazas that display a storytelling of the billboard, of the history of the billboard along Sunset, also landscape meadow, and more landscaping. The building or the billboard itself is glare resistant. The steel of it is glare resistant to the frame structure. So that's ensuring no reflection. This project was reviewed in April by the Sunset Arts and Advertising Subcommittee, and I just wanted to go over a summary of the comments that was received at that committee meeting. First and foremost, subcommittee members were concerned about the lack of design features on the back of the sign, to make it more welcoming heading into the city from the west. In response, the applicant did add a new loop on the back of the billboard with a cable mesh system to soften the appearance and avoid a blank face on the back. There was a comment about the welcome sign there that is existing, and could there be a welcome sign placed on the back of the billboard? The welcome signs are really under the purview of city council direction and not a private responsibility. Also, the applicant will be presenting later this evening some alternatives for the back of the design in response to recent comments from commissioners on that issue. The subcommittee wanted assurance that there would be only one campaign on both faces at any given time, and that is a condition of approval. The subcommittee asked the applicant to look into reflectivity of the sign and structure materials, consider wind loads, tunnel effect, and of course, effects of the sun. Extensive engineering will be required for this billboard, and it will be done prior to building permits. Again, the cladding is non-reflective on the billboard structure itself. There was a issue or question brought up about the Medio logo sign. Could it be made vertical or integrated into the loop sign? The applicant has chosen to keep the Medio logo sign horizontal at the base of the largest sign face, and it does float off the loop at the bottom of the sign face. There was a question about the ratio of replacement of trees. Two private on-site trees were proposed to be removed, and they would be need to be replaced or relocated based on the landscape standards in the zoning code. Again, the applicant may now be providing replacement trees on site, and they will present that in their presentation later. Within the plaza itself, the initial, when the subcommittee reviewed this project, the initial information on the interactive boards about the history of the logo on Sunset, they were QR codes, which staff and the subcommittee agreed, could become obsolete, and that the subcommittee would really like more sort of present graphic information and narrative, and that has been changed on the interpretive plaques in the plaza areas. This is a night view of the billboard. It's sort of wedged between two taller office buildings there in Sunset. I'm going to turn this over to Rick Abramson for the design discussion.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Rick Abramson, City Architect. So as Jennifer mentioned, There's a lot of components to this project that have been thought through pretty thoroughly. The siting of the building, I think, from an urban design standpoint, is really interesting because you have a very vertical, tall building, and the looping design, the kind of curving tubular structure represents a nice contrast from the very orthogonal and rectilinear building. So it stands out on its own. It has its own integrity, but I think the thickness of the tubular form and the creative structure is part of what the arts and advertising program was hoping for, that we look at structure perhaps in a different way in certain cases, not just billboard faces, but in this case, the oblong or circular billboard faces are also very unique within the program. So as a whole, I think this adds really nicely to the projects you've seen before and the projects that are to come, and shows and demonstrates the variation that creative design can bring to advertising. There was some discussion about the backside, and staff has, worked with the applicant to come up with a couple of other options that you can discuss this evening that they'll be going through. There is a kiosk in the public right-of-way adjacent to the new piece, the new billboard structure. That's been looked at as well fairly carefully, and I think staff feels that the scale of it works well with the scale of the billboard. They're not competing with each other and wouldn't interfere with each other per se. Next, please. There's a number of elements in the plaza that I think are going to contribute to a heightened pedestrian experience. As you know, one of the key aspects of this program, in addition to the advertising and the art component, is the public realm enhancements. This project does take that very seriously and is proposing a complete story that is about the legacy of billboards in the city as a whole. They're proposing a series of plaques or semi-monuments that are located and integrated into a looping wall system. And the idea is that these plaques would tell the story of the evolution of billboards and their importance on the Sunset Strip historically. I think, again, that fits well into some of the other storytelling and some of the other projects. And, the hope is that when this program is complete and all the billboards are constructed, that there will be many moments that really create a new opportunity for pedestrians to experience the Strip. And I think this fits in particularly well. In the plaza itself, there will be inscribed patterning that further reinforces the kind of looping language of the project. Those will be done through terrazzo strips. And I'll let the applicant kind of elaborate more on the specifics of the design intention. Next. So the billboard culture on the Sunset Strip is fundamental to its core identity. It's what many associate with the Strip, and so telling this story of some of the earlier interventions, the more iconic interventions, how they became more dynamic, I think is something that is worth chronicling and leaving a legacy on the Strip. Next. And so that story, as Jennifer said, I think we felt was important that it take the human being into account and not just pure technology. So it is a more one-on-one tactile and visual experience that, again, the applicant will elaborate on. Back to you, Jennifer.
Thank you. So ending with these, a couple of slides that show a sort of view shed moment. These are Google images, but this is going eastbound from Beverly Hills, and it's approximately 550 feet away from the back of the sign. There's no visibility of the sign at this point. This is closer. This is where it first sort of would become visible, and that's about 175 feet from the billboard, again, heading east. And this is the westbound view, approximately 550 feet from the billboard. Because of the curve of Sunset, it doesn't really become visible until you start to round that intersection at Corey. The CEQA analysis on this, there were two documents, two CEQA documents. First is the negative declaration that was prepared for the off-site signage policy to begin with, which found no significant environmental impacts. In addition, an addendum was prepared in April 2021, which addressed all of the round one projects, 9200 Sunset included. That addendum found no new environmental impacts nor a requirement for any new mitigation measures with those proposed billboards. Staff does recommend approval of the resolutions 1576, 1577, and 1575, recommending that the City Council approve this project. Sign permit, zoning map amendment development agreement, which would allow the new billboard and site improvements at 9200. And I believe you were given a memo with clerical corrections, so that recommendation would include those corrections as well. That really concludes staff's presentation, but I wanted to say that the applicant, and I'm perfectly happy to answer any questions, but the applicant would like to give a presentation, and that will include more specifics on lighting for the project and landscaping and alternatives for the back of the billboard. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any disclosures before we get too far?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Matos.
I met with the applicant's representative and we discussed matters contained in the staff report. Oh, and I also visited the site for the purposes of this meeting.
Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, I had a phone call with the applicant's representative and we discussed items contained in the staff report.
Anyone else? Commissioner Solomon?
I also had a phone call with the applicant's representative and discussed items pertaining to the staff report.
And likewise, I received a phone call from the applicant's representative. It was brief. We talked about a few items in the staff report, and that was the extent of that. Any other disclosures? No? How about if Commissioner Matos, would you be willing to give a SASE design review update? We had a pretty good list from the staff report, but if there's anything you feel is worth adding.
No, I think that the summary that was provided by Jennifer Davis and that is reflected in the staff report is accurate. Just to go over that very quickly, there were concerns raised in the meeting regarding lack of design features on the back of the sign and the blankness of the back of the sign. The other comments were about one campaign for both faces, and that was addressed in the staff report. Reflectivity concerns about the materials of the sign structure, considering wind loads, tunnel effect, etc. Questions about the media logo sign, the tree replacement plan, given that there are existing trees at this site, and display information on the walls in the pedestrian streetscape enhancements. Other than that, there were no comments made according to my notes.
Great, thank you so much. So next would be the applicant's presentation. And please state your name and city of residence, and you have 10 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you, Chairman Lombardi. My name is Jeff Seymour.
Microphone, please. It's a little hard to hear you. Could you speak into the microphone? Yes, microphone. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I reside in Westlake Village. I just initially want to commend staff for being as helpful and assisting us as we move forward. We have a very detailed presentation that we're going to be giving you by Ben Anderson from Office Untitled. And I'm going to start with that, and then we'll be here to answer any questions you may have.
Chair, quick question to staff.
I'm so sorry.
Is there a problem with the microphone of the applicant?
Can you hear me?
I just want to make sure that it's on and that it's adequately
How's the volume? Just
I
gotta
know
lean
it
in.
did sound a little bit soft. I also want to note, we did skip over if there's any questions of staff, but we could also wait until the applicant speaks. Maybe that's clearer anyway. Yeah, okay. Now I'm losing my voice, so you probably can't hear me. Hopefully the microphone's working now.
Let's hope so. There we
Okay.
go. Good evening. Excited to present this project. Given the thoroughness of the staff report and the presentation from Jen Davis and Rick, I thought we'd focus a little bit on some of the comments that were received and some of the progress that we've made in anticipation of approval. I think everybody's familiar with the site, but one thing that does make it stand out is it's the last thing you see, one of the last things you see as you leave West Hollywood, and one of the first things you see coming in. The context that Rick had pointed out, that we are between two very large commercial office buildings, and we are proposing to place this billboard in a very small footprint. So the result of that was a fairly tall structure that we felt was appropriate given the height of the existing buildings, both to the south and to the north of Sunset. This is an existing site plan just showing the sort of trapezoidal shape that is proposed for the billboard. Uniquely, the parking structure for the 9200 building goes underneath the property line and all the way to the curb. So the existing trees that are here are not in native soil. They are on top of the parking structure. And that's part of the reason why the billboard is sited here, so that it can tie into the existing parking structure's basement superstructure. As Jen described, we do have kind of a very welcoming pedestrian plaza around the foot of the Legacy Loop, and that's intended, one, to provide this narrative wall that Rick had described to tell the story of creative outdoor advertising in the billboard on the Sunset Strip, but also just to get a little closer and hopefully pique people's curiosity and get them to come and want to investigate this very unique piece of kind of urban sculpture. The sign positions are almost, in one case, 90 degrees to Sunset, in another case, about 80. So we are, in terms of light intrusion or light spill to other areas, this is facing just right down Sunset. Quick just elevation of our billboard in comparison with the existing building. Again, it is very tall, but it does feel it does feel appropriate given the existing building. This area, there were some comments at SASE about what to do with the back of the billboard. We do have a little bit of the sequencing of what's happened in the last several months. And what you see here, we've expanded on, so we're excited to present that. But just moving through these elevations, one of the things that makes this billboard unique is it's very long read. So you have a stoplight, you've kind of come around the curve where the Hornburg Jaguar dealership used to be, and you've got a nice straight long view as you're leaving West Hollywood and heading into Beverly Hills. And we're certainly aware of the late afternoon sun at certain times of year that would be competing with this. But at the end of the day, this is an internally illuminated billboard. And at that kind of transition period, the lights will come on and kind of help to battle a little bit of visibility. We've always seen this as a very dynamic kind of composition of form. The idea of a kind of a looping, kind of continuous structure that kind of appears to, in some cases, be in motion, but also is animated by moving up and down Sunset, whether in a vehicle or as a pedestrian. That was kind of core to some of the very early ideas that we haven't necessarily shared at public hearings, but the idea that the curvature and the energy of Sunset itself can, in some cases, be captured in form. And so the composition or the kind of diagram that you're seeing here is this continuous loop, and what we had kind of striven to do is whenever the loop crossed over itself, it created a face or kind of a moment or a moment of energy or something to pay attention to. So that's kind of how we generated the first 2 sign faces. And with SASE input, we were able to kind of add another one on the back that is an opportunity to draw people's attention that is not a sign. Site plan was described previously as an interesting series of kind of color changing concrete pavement that's with kind of an inscribed detail on it that we'll talk about in a second. So if we're looking at a plan, apologies, the plan is flipped. This would be Sunset. There's this sort of abstraction from the straight line of the sidewalk all the way to this narrative wall. And in some ways, the sort of curvature of this in plan mimics the curvature of Sunset in plan as well. And across this narrative wall are the 6 moments of history of the billboard on the Sunset Strip, as Jen and Rick mentioned. I'm happy to go into more detail on some of these, but in the interest of time, I did want to focus on some of the things that came up in the last several weeks, namely concerns about residential neighbors, not in West Hollywood, but that would potentially be able to see this new structure. And this diagram shows that there are a portion of residential units within the Sierra Tower that will be able to see the billboard from beyond the 9225 building. We benefit from the fact that it blocks the majority of those units and keeps any light within the kind of this canyon of Sunset. Another view looking north to Sierra Tower shows that the top 10 corner units would have some form of visibility to the billboard. The lowest one, very little. The upper one, as you'll see here, a little bit. There is just being able to see the structure here at that lowest unit. And at the tallest one, or the unit with the most visibility to this billboard, you're seeing less than half of it. You can also see that the sign face is pointing straight up Sunset and not at these neighbors. We did add a little bit of a detail to the landscape plan. Really, the intent of this is that we wanted something that was low water use, native in some cases, and drought tolerant, that was essentially kind of become a calm meadow. It's really not the star of the show here, given how sculptural and the form of the sign is. But happy to share this information or go through it with questions. This is also relatively new, and I think the questions about specifics on the lighting really spurred us to produce this. We're trying to keep it very simple. Again, the transition from the street with a lot of headlights and ambient light to the billboard face itself is really this zone right here. And so we've worked with lighting consultant to come up with a specification and a concept around a soft gradient of light that shifts from rather bright to catch your eye and slowly fades away as the 2 sign faces sort of steal your attention. There's no other light planned within the meadow. However, each of these totems and kind of narrative plaque moments, we have tweaked it a little bit from previous assumptions. I think what we're suggesting now is a small wash of LED light down the side of this that actually kind of forms a little bit of a bollard and helps to light the pedestrian plaza, helps to provide a little bit of lighting into the meadow. And then we have some LED lighting kind of to preserve the content or the interest in the content. Lastly, given the importance that we've placed on this narrative wall, there is an in-ground uplit LED strip that helps provide a little bit of a wash and some visual interest for folks who are walking around. We do have some specs, happy to talk about them, but I think high level, we're looking for something that was relatively small, that had more fixtures versus the opposite. This allows us to keep the visibility of the fixture relatively low. These are a little bit more flexible to use and would be placed in the ground in a concrete footing so they can't walk off. And we're thinking it's more of a tight beam that can focus the light that we are spreading on the structure itself and eliminate unneeded light spill, but also with an eye to glare, looking for a rather robust shield. This is a picture of the in-ground LED It's meant to kind of curve and have moments of straightness. It's incredibly durable. You can drive over it with a backhoe. You can step on it in high heels, and it's meant to be power washed. So from a maintenance standpoint, this seemed like a very suitable recommendation. And the casing that it comes in can shift colors or be simpatico with the kind of the color palette that we have. Lastly, for the sort of bollard effect on the plaques themselves, relatively simple LED fixture that kind of, the amount of light that it itself puts out, or the visibility of the fixture kind of goes away and lets the wash of that, provide a little bit of a welcoming light, or the light levels that we need. Obviously open to questions afterward. Moving on, in terms of visibility, as Jen pointed out, the really robust tree canopy in Beverly Hills as you move up Sunset pretty much blocks it entirely until we are at around 175 feet, which at 30 miles an hour is about 4 seconds of visibility. As we do get closer, these are some additional views that we've put in. The back of the billboard is visible, and I think the recommendations from SASE to do something, in this case add an additional loop here, and in addition to that, this kind of a cable mesh design, which we'll feature in a second. And then as you get closer, this is 75 feet from the sign itself. So if we're looking at a quick progression, where we were at SASE, the results post SASE, and with some of the comments, we've really leaned in on this idea of something dynamic that, just like the structure itself, welcomes you as you move past. There's some thoughts about whether this is relatively thin and a little bit more immaterial as a cable or a rod, or something that could become kind of like a twisted plane. But again, meant to be dynamic, but dynamic, appeal to both vehicle travel and pedestrians alike. Or as an alternate, we do have, in terms of the way the structure has spread, the opportunity to place a tree and maybe even two, so that the portions of at least what you see when you're in your vehicle with your windscreen, you aren't necessarily looking all the way up, but that would be one certain way in terms of an alternate, not using architecture or cable meshes, but just natural greenery to help solve
Ben, if
this.
you can wrap it up, our time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions at this time? Yes, Commissioner Gregoire.
I like the concept of the cable mesh on the back side there, but I see you only have it at the bottom of the sign. Why were you not proposing to go all the way up to the top? It seems like that could be a really interesting addition, and it would be responsive to the concerns I have about the aesthetics of driving eastbound.
Mm-hmm. We certainly could. I think just having driven up and down this many times, putting kind of the vehicular lens on, we feel that your experience in a car is really limited to kind of the bottom half or the bottom third of the structure. And if that's the majority of people who are experiencing this coming into West Hollywood, certainly recognize the concern that, whether it's intended to be a welcome to West Hollywood sign or not, it's quite iconic, and so people are going to treat it as a gateway moment. So doing something that's dynamic for that level, I think, is we're fully into, and would potentially be open to doing the same up above if ultimately it had value in terms of being able to see it. As a pedestrian, you would, but there is just not a lot of pedestrian traffic on this section of Sunset, and it's something that we worked very closely with staff on, with kind of creating that draw with the story of the billboard.
Yeah, because the aesthetics of it have been a concern of mine, and the cable mesh, the various variants, A, B, and C look great, but it seems like it would be nice to have it all the way up to the top.
Mm-hmm.
That's my only question.
Anyone else? Questions? Commissioner Solomon?
I have some questions for staff, not necessarily related to this project. If we can back up just a second.
Yeah, and I know we've kind of jumped around, so we could stay on the track of design. We can go to staff questions. Maybe that makes sense, and come back to design. So please.
And pardon my ignorance. This is my first billboard project since joining the commission. So these might be elementary questions, but in reading through the sunset offsite signage policy, it's recommended that in the West region where this is, that there is a distribution of three digital billboards. So my question is, in the West region, how many digital billboards are there?
Could we get to the Zoom? Because I believe Jennifer Davis might be able to answer that.
There we go.
Oh, sorry, I was speaking, you guys didn't hear me, sorry. We've only approved 10 billboards thus far, and the closest one that's digital to this one would be the 9157 building, not too far around the corner from this. So that's the closest one on the west side. But there are certainly others in the pipeline.
So I guess my question, this is a vinyl static billboard that's internally illuminated. My question, and I don't mean to unwind any sort of process, but why is this merely a vinyl billboard that's presented to us tonight when we haven't hit the recommended number of digital billboards on this side of town according to the policy?
The whole billboard program started with a design excellence review of many applications for billboards along Sunset. And we sort of try to put them in groups of digital, not digital, west side, east side, sort of a distribution of different kinds of billboards. And that's probably where the three come from that you're asking about. If in this case, this billboard in design excellence was awarded a static billboard award. So that's why it came forward as a static.
Was the design put forward as either a digital or a static? And then I'm trying to understand if it was an applicant decision for this to be a static billboard or a city-led decision for this to be a static billboard.
Well, the applicants put forward their applications, but in reviewing all of the applications that came through, I think the design excellence and staff at the time were trying to meet certain amounts of different kinds of signs in different areas. This one came in as a static, it was reviewed as a static, and it was awarded a concept award as a static.
It came in as a static.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. Not being here and not knowing the history.
Ask away. It's been a program that's been going on for a few years. So.
And just for my benefit, I know as I read through the development agreement and sum up all the numbers, the projected payments to the city, the 20% of gross revenue from the sign projected is $7 million over a 30-year period. Just out of curiosity, if this were a digital billboard rather than a static billboard, do you have any sort of estimation about what those numbers would be? I understand that a digital billboard can probably fetch a higher fee, but I'm curious as to the difference.
I could address.
Yeah. Oh, okay, Brian, you can answer that.
We have them valued as a digital board. I don't have that with me, but it would probably be 10 times more value. But again, they requested a static board, and that's what they were awarded. So,
okay. Those are all of my staff questions. Thank you.
Anyone else have questions? Commissioner Hoopengardner?
Just a first quick question. I'm trying to understand under the view shed analysis on page 30 and 31, is there a reason why the Bourbon Fir sign was excluded from the analysis?
can we go back to the Zoom? That would be a Jennifer Davis. You're muted.
No, I'm not muted.
Okay.
You'll need to share your screen in order to go to any maps or plans.
Yes, I'm just asking what document Commissioner's
I'm
referring
looking at the
to?
plans,
Plans,
pages
okay.
30 and 31.
Just need to pull those out. Okay. Okay, 30, okay, here we go. And what was your question again?
Well, the Berman Firs sign, it's easier actually to see on 31. You're showing the, I'll call it the Mike Oldham Tubular Bells version billboard off to the right, but the Berman Firs one to the left is not there. So I was just curious as to why that wasn't included in the viewshed analysis. Because it's an
Yeah.
existing billboard, it's already built.
That's a good point. I wonder if the architect could determine if that was visible from that.
Well, it
point.
has to be. It's to the left of the tubular bells.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Thanks for the question, Commissioner Hoopengarner. This project started in 2020 when neither the 9157 or the Berman Firs building billboards, excuse me, had been built. And so the data that we're taking from public data sets, namely Google Street View, this is what it was providing. Absent just driving down Sunset with our own photographs, which we have done sometimes to do more thorough sightline studies. When we do have concerns about blockage, in this case there was no concerns about blockage, given the fact that we are all the way off to the right and Sunset curves in the opposite direction. It is an omission, admittedly, but in terms of current conditions, but this is what Google Street View gave us.
Okay, well, we do have a list of existing billboards, so that was available. All right, I just wondered if there was a conscious reason for its exclusion.
No.
Thank you. Okay. I have a number of questions about the development agreement. First, just from a housekeeping perspective, there seems to be just, I don't know what's going on with the numbering. It was extremely difficult to follow.
Yes, that was not our intent. It was through the pagination process with the system that produced the digital package, all our formatting went out. So I apologize for that. That's certainly not
Well,
how...
it isn't even formatting. The actual numbers don't.
I'm aware of that.
Are completely out of sync. So I had a really hard time following what was a subsection of another subsection, et cetera.
I fully agree. Grant us something when we submitted it, something happened, and
okay.
We will check it
right,
and make
so
sure that doesn't happen again.
I will try and work through my questions in light of that. So let's go to page 19 of the development agreement. Under site improvements, and this kind of applies to all of our agreements, but you know, there doesn't seem to be any consequences if these site improvements aren't maintained over the 30-year period. And I realize you could have an event of default, but that's pretty extreme. And so triggering it, yeah, not maintaining the site would be an event of default, and you could execute, you could proceed under an event of default. But is there no other way to make sure that these things are adhered to in a way without having to trigger an event of default?
It's I think that's a great point, and it's something that we should consider. Off the top, I mean, we're in partnership with these applicants. the fact that we might threaten default might get them to maintain the site, but is there an in-between step? I see your point.
Especially, back to our old friend assignment, this is sellable. We could be in partnership with the former president next week.
Yes.
We don't know who we're going to be in business with. So it's just an ongoing.
I mean, we do it with the occupancy. Maybe there's a way to, if they're not maintaining it properly, there's a notice and the revenue assignment goes up.
Something.
Okay.
Something that's more easily triggerable and actionable than going through legal and having a whole event of default.
I see your point. I agree.
And Commissioner Hoopengardner, I did want to note the project description within the conditions of approval on the site for the entitlement resolution does specify the site improvements as part of that description. So there is some accountability with the entitlements as well.
Right. But again, the consequences are only, actionable through default, and that's my concern. Okay, funny you should bring up occupancy. So if we turn to page 20 and look at paragraph, hold on. So number 5, building occupancy. I'm going to read this out loud. Bear with me, because I had a really hard time with this, and it doesn't make any sense to me. So, notwithstanding any terms to the contrary herein, if more than 50% of the usable ground floor area within this building, the occupancy threshold, remains unoccupied for more than 12 consecutive months during the term, then for the period commencing on the first day following such 12-month period, okay, and ending on the first day thereafter. What is that?
I assume that's 25 months out?
Well, commencing on the first day following such 12-month period and ending on the first day thereafter, that would be day 2.
Commissioner Hoopengardner, I'm reading it as the first day following the 12-month period.
Then on the first, it commences on the first day following such 12-month period. Fine, got that. But ending on the first day thereafter. What is thereafter? I mean, what is that period? If you go to the calendar, how do you?
Well, and I would say with the second clause, first day thereafter, that the occupancy level of the building exceeds the occupancy threshold for that second thereafter.
Okay, this is a bit of a run-on sentence that's got some issues, I think. Because it then goes on to say, as the city's sole and exclusive remedy for the failure of the occupancy level of the building to exceed the occupancy threshold, the public benefit payment shall be increased by 25%. Is that permanent? Is that only during the period when it's below the threshold? What is it?
It's only during the period that are not meeting the occupancy threshold.
That's not clear.
Okay.
At all. That's, I know a few lawyers who could argue over that in perpetuity based on that language. I think that needs some serious housekeeping. And just the whole, I mean, 9-sentence, 1-sentence thing needs some work. Okay. Moving on down in that same one giant paragraph, towards the bottom. Notwithstanding the foregoing or anything to the contrary contained herein, and recognizing that this is a small building where occupancy rates can be low with the loss of one tenant. How is this a small building?
I think we could correct this. That was originally when the intent was that 50% of the building had to be occupied. Now we're just saying 50% of the ground floor, and so that was carryover language. But I think the intent there was a single tenant in this building could occupy 40% of it, and if they moved out.
See, my other concern about this whole thing is we went through this on the Equinox building, and we had a whole discussion about excluding the high-rise component and focusing on the street level component, and that was categorically, denied, and everybody said, no, 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 we have to include all the high-rise, and now all of a sudden we're excluding the high-rise.
That was the direction we had from City Council, so that was on
Specific to this project?
On all projects going forward. They were more interested in the ground floor.
Okay. Still not a small building. Okay. All right. Number 6. No, wait. We got a lot of number 6s here. Pages 22 and 23. I think this is back to your numbering. There's like a number 1 assignment, but there's nothing in it, and then there's 1 right to assign underneath it. So, okay. Moving on to page 29. General provisions, number 8, number 1, removal of permitted sign. So this is back to an event of default, a shutting down of this project. This language doesn't say who's going to have to pay for the removal of the sign. So, especially in an event of default or bankruptcy, you've got someone you have no ability to pursue the funding to remove now a dead sign. So is there somewhere else that I missed in the language that would provide for who is to pay for the removal of the sign? Or is that something that the city could do and then put a lien against the property for it? I mean, I don't,
Yeah, I don't know. Do you?
I don't know that offhand, whether it could be a lien.
Okay, so I think that's a kind of another hole that needs plugging. I saw the fee schedule, but I couldn't read it at all. To me, especially as a exhibit to a document that's being approved, I think we ought to be, receiving documents that we can actually read. And theoretically could tick and tie to the document itself. Isaac, I did read the language about obstruction and about the gateway, but could we say for certain on the record that the city, any proposed city gateway projects are 100% protected and, not subject to any obstruction clauses or anything of such ilk?
Yeah, Commissioner Hoopengard, my only hesitation, I'm not as familiar with the Gateway project, but my understanding is that project has not been approved
It doesn't
yet.
exist yet, but
Yeah.
we have some concepts, et cetera. But the idea is
Yes.
that a
Yes.
city-owned project in concept, especially in the median, et cetera, that there are no protections.
Yes, I do think the language is sufficient for the protections
Okay.
you're
I want your,
Understood.
I want
Yep.
your blessing on this one. Okay, thank you. And then, just to the point about the landscaping, I think that no, only half of the plants proposed are native. The others are from Australia and South and Asia, actually. And once again, I think it could be a more diverse population. As for the idea of the tree behind the back, you guys know me, I'm all for trees. But I think that to the extent that we all are in agreement about, you know, the scrolling and how that has improved the aesthetic of the back, I feel that a tree could interfere with that. Now, that doesn't mean we couldn't put a tree on the back of that lot, you know, because we are taking out 2 trees. You know, that could we put something on, I guess, what would be the south side of the triangle to replace one of the trees, or maybe 2 on each side of the actual structure to the back, which wouldn't in any way interfere with, especially depending on what you put. Like if you plant a ginkgo or something that's got a nice tall columnar structure, it wouldn't compete with the building and yet provide a nice canopy tree. And that brings me to page 5 on 17, page number 5, one of the number 5s on page 17, about the replacement trees. It just says any on-site tree removal shall follow the regulations of the zoning ordinance. And I just want to make sure, based on how we deal with deemed complete, et cetera, and when our tree canopy ordinance was enacted, and how, Isaac, how does that work in terms of this development agreement and the vesting? In other words, what rule applies? When was the canopy ordinance, adopted relative to their deemed complete? And when we're talking about following the regulations of the zoning ordinance, are we talking about our newest, replacement tree ordinance or not?
Well, Commissioner Hoopengardner, what I'm thinking about is that our conditions of approval would be relevant, and that includes that requirement with respect to replacements under the landscape standards and tree canopy standards. So I think there's a accountability with the existing standards that they would need to pull the permits.
I mean, per the vesting paragraph, the vesting happens the day this thing is executed, which is presumably the ordinances that are in place on that day. The last time I looked at the ordinance, I had some concerns that it looked like it was a little spotty in terms of was the tree ordinance fully enacted or not. Because I know this question came up unrelated in another project, and I looked it up and it wasn't there when I went online. So that's my concern, is the timing of deemed complete, when the tree canopy ordinance was enacted, and thus obviously the vesting here.
Commissioner Hoopengardner, one follow-up question. Were you looking at a specific term, and I apologize if I missed it, within the DA about the canopy ordinance?
Yes.
Okay, and sorry, what term was that?
It's page 17. It's number 5, obstruction, that starts at the bottom of page 16. And it's like, I don't know, 5 rows down. It's a new sentence. Any on-site tree removal on the owner's property shall follow the regulations in the zoning ordinance. Hence my question about which zoning ordinance?
Yes, I do think the zoning ordinance, yes, is locked into place for purposes of the DA. However, I do think with respect to the reference in the entitlement resolution to the canopy ordinance, that is applicable to having to pull the permits specific to the project.
I'm not sure I understand.
In my mind, there's something distinguishable about the reference in the entitlement conditions of approval to the tree canopy ordinance and the reference, to your point, that you just read regarding the zoning ordinance regulations in the development agreement, which are vested and locked into place when the DA is approved.
So could we get an answer as to when the tree canopy ordinance was officially went into act, you know, into efficacy, you know?
The question is when the city's tree canopy ordinance
Right.
went into effect?
I mean, assuming it was prior to the day the city signs
Yes,
the DA.
correct. I apologize.
And,
Correct.
And,
Yes.
and assuming that was all done,
Yes.
then yes, then it would be covered by vesting.
Yeah.
Okay? And locked in. So that's my only question is it done?
I'm not following it. Is what done?
The tree ordinance.
I see it in the code, but I will defer to the city.
And that I don't know.
I've seen parts of it in the code, but I have seen other areas of the code where parts of it are missing. And that's the reason I asked the question. Is 100% of what was approved in the tree canopy ordinance, as approved by City Council, has it been fully enacted in the zoning ordinance?
Commissioner, I think I can maybe clarify. It is fully enacted, and sometimes the code takes several months to update and refresh. So perhaps when you were looking, it might not have reflected what was adopted. There's a lag of time sometimes. But it was, I believe, almost a year ago that the tree canopy ordinance was adopted by
Because
council.
it was only a month or two ago that I looked at it and it was missing still. So that was my concern.
We'll have to check on the publication.
And to be clear then, that the DA is about what is approved regardless of publication.
Yeah, my understanding is that the tree ordinance was adopted, I think, almost within the past year, within the past 12 months.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and basically, it would vest when, you know, the project was deemed complete. So, depending upon when this was deemed complete, that would determine whether or not the project would be subject to the tree ordinance or not.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Matos?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just have a quick procedural question for staff. It seems that the applicant has proposed a series of remedies to address the SASE concerns pertaining to the back of the billboard. Procedurally, would we need to make as a body a recommendation to council on a condition of approval in line with one of these recommendations that has been presented? Or, you know, what is needed from us to pass along to council if this were to pass tonight? What's needed from us? Because it seems like there's been a few options proposed, and there's been a few.
Were there? I only have plans for one.
There was part of the staff presentation.
In the presentation.
And FYI, I have some design-related questions. I'm letting everyone talk, but
yeah,
but I think that we'll, with my questions, we'll see them again. Is what I was going to get at.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'm totally prepared to have that design question. I guess just given that there's been presented options in the applicant's presentation, how would we go forward with making a recommendation or conditional of approval for council?
Commissioner Meadows, I think we could address that probably after, you know, as part of deliberations and after public comment, depending on sort of the specific of what that recommendation consensus may be in terms of how that would potentially go up to the city council.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That's my only procedural question for staff.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's worth discussing in deliberation for sure. I do have one question. Well, the development agreement does need some cleaning up, but my question, and not to put anyone on the spot here, but this whole occupiable area on this, there's not a lot of ground floor anything on this project. I guess there's a restaurant. I'm not super familiar with what happens other than the restaurant on the ground floor. But I just wanted to flag that. Does staff know, or does the applicant know?
I mean, again, the intent was to keep the ground floor active, and we picked 50% as the threshold. The restaurant might be 50% or 75%.
Commissioner, on the other side of where the restaurant is, on the other side is a bank.
I couldn't hear you. I'm sorry.
On the other side of the building, we have the restaurant on one side, we have a bank on the other.
Bank. Yes. Okay. Thank you. That's it in terms of retail space. Okay, thank you. I do think page 17, the future gateway project, there's a lot of cleanup there in that sentence. Just, I want to flag that. You can comb through it. I do have a quick note on the sign permit. I feel like I bring this up all the time, but page 4, under D, it does say that the proposed billboard does not include architectural lighting, but then there's this whole thing of lighting of architecture right here that I'm looking at, so I would just strike that. Well, okay, that's for deliberation, but I guess my question is, why is that there? Maybe we can look at that next. And then I think Commissioner Hoopengarner flagged a couple of other things. I won't get into the numbering. I do have design questions, which might be good to go through with the applicant since there's been some updates. And maybe I'll start at ground level. I think staff mentioned terrazzo floor or terrazzo-like floor. I think your documentation is calling out a cast-in-place concrete. So I just wanted to understand what was happening in what we're seeing in your renderings and on the plans.
Yeah, thank you for flagging that. The term terrazzo did come up with in a meeting with staff. Whether it's ground down aggregate to expose it like a terrazzo, or it's simply a poured concrete pavement, that really the goal was to have it subtly shift as it comes off of Sunset with each of those sort of layers of the brass inlay. So it sort of constructed it a little bit in the same way. There are some concerns about terrazzo with outdoor uses in terms of slippage with water. So, you know, it would need to be treated regardless, but it is a poured concrete paver.
It's a poured on-site concrete paver. And then I'm confused on the inlays. Are those brass inlays? Or?
Yeah, those are part of the, when the concrete is poured, they're put in.
Okay. And thank you for some clarification on the call-outs, because the original renderings pointed to some stuff, but then it wasn't really illustrated or on the plan, so it got me confused. So your intent is to have this line of light that illuminates this wall, but it looks like it's stopping where it touches the sidewalk.
Yeah, that's something that we're still refining. It can continue. At the moment, we had modeled and drawn the wall right at the property line, so all it needs is an inch or inch and a half for that to happen, so we can certainly take that into account.
Okay. I mean, I'm questioning durability of that still. You know, I went through a lot of that when I was working on the AIDS Memorial Project in New York, and that was a straight run. It wasn't a flexible run, a fixture. So I just would question if it's necessary and ask you if you feel strongly for it. I mean, I just want to acknowledge that that's that would have to be maintained. So is the applicant prepared to maintain that?
It's a good point. At the moment, we are, and it's part of how to feature the wall.
Okay. I had some concerns about the uplighting, but looking closer, if the intent is to include the snoots and shields, you said yes, so that will help as long as those fixtures can be concealed. Also, I'm not sure about your maybe just refinement on how you're lighting the placards, if that's what you're calling them, or the plaques, and the text that's within it. Like, you're showing this click thing, but I can just tell you, looking at the image that's next to it, that I think that's lighting the sidewalk. It's not lighting the box. So I don't know if your reference image is relating to what's happening and if it's doing what it should do, but I trust that you'll resolve that. And the intent is there's lighting in the box.
That's correct.
Refinement there, maybe.
That was a kind of a precedent image, not actually part of that specification.
Yeah. Okay. I understand now.
But it's a good point.
But I don't know if that fixture does what the image does, but you can sort that out. Other things I wanted to note. So It would be great if you could go to the slides that had the different options for the cable mesh or the plants, trees.
Yep.
I'm sorry, was there another, I got this last supplemental one, but I don't have anything that has the cable mesh options on it.
I thought it was in the updated packet, but now I'm looking and I'm not.
No, it was just in the presentation provided by the applicant.
Yeah, so then I would have problems with talking about approving a document, given that the resolution talks about the plans presented
Yeah.
in the, at this meeting, as presented to the public, as delivered to the public. I mean, Isaac, I'll let you opine on this, but I don't feel really comfortable about all of a sudden deliberating on a bunch of ideas that were presented at the 11th hour and not, and having no time to review them, and the public having no time to review them. So, Isaac, I don't know your feelings on that.
Applicant's presentation is part of the administrative record and part of the hearing. So I think it's really the commission's decision regarding its comfort with the plans that are presented as part of that hearing. But they are a part of the record, and we are.
But the public has no access to them.
I would think the members following along of the public are going to be able to view them, and then we haven't yet taken public comment as well, to the extent the public might have.
And I appreciate that, but speaking as a former member of the public, and still a current member of the public, I know it's difficult enough to constantly be having to go to the website and saying, oh, is there something new? Oh, is there something new? All day, every day for 7 days, and then having this show up at whatever o'clock today, and if you saw that and had problems with it and wanted to speak on it, it was never available to you. So
I mean, yeah, should we, maybe in deliberation, we can go through this more? I'm sorry, wait until you see a project we're going to get soon, because I had serious questions on that one.
Okay.
And, I was very firm about it during the meeting.
I think this is much a procedural question as it has anything to do with this project. It has to do with, members of the public who may have been following this project and thought what they saw was what was going to be discussed.
Yeah, well,
and now they've got this whole new thing, and they have no ability to discuss it.
If you're comfortable with it, maybe we can pick up this discussion in deliberation.
Deliberations, I'm fine with that.
Okay, yeah. In the meantime, just because we're here and we're looking at this, and this seems to be my only opportunity, I'm going to let you know what I think. And I understand and hear what you're saying, so I hope we can talk about it.
I was just asking what I was missing, because I didn't have any documents.
Well, I'm glad you flagged it. I thought it was in this, which arrived at the last hour, but it's not in this, so go figure. Anyway, looking at the cable mesh, so I'll just say the ones at the right, I can't see that B and C, they look kind of spider webby, so I don't know, I kind of like the linear stuff more, but I'm not sure how final that is, so it's hard to judge. But I don't know if are you familiar with the artist Gabrielle Dahl, who just like the metal mesh, and it's usually like rainbow colors. So if you go to like the Renwick building, like the Smithsonian Contemporary Art Building in DC, anyway, look at something like that. I guess there's an opportunity, I'm saying, with that element to have a play with daylight and make it something really special and make it kind of like an art piece. So you might want to, I don't know, there's artists, I guess I'm saying, that could kind of do something unique. That could be an opportunity. The trees, I love the idea of trees. I see the potential concern as well. And on the topic of trees, I got really confused in what transpired between when this arrived and what I saw in the planting plan and what's called out in the staff report. So the 2 trees that are being removed, is the intent to replace them on site or not?
Correct.
Which one?
The intent is to replace them on site.
It is. Okay. And so, and are they shown on the plan? Did I just miss that?
No, it's not shown on the plan.
Oh, okay. Do you have a location in mind for the other 2 trees?
behind the main building, there's a kind of a courtyard between the tower and a lower portion of the office. And per the city standards, the 36 inches of soil depth would allow us to place a planter. The real challenge here is that there's just no, there's nothing where there's dirt. In fact, all the way up to the curb line, as I had said. So we're going to have to do something in a planter, but we can do it in such a way that it meets city standards.
Do you have a tree in mind?
No.
Okay. Okay. Let me get back to other questions then. So cable mesh system, trees. I do, just for what it's worth, thank you for the refinements to the rear. Are you comfortable with the changes that you've made? You've added some complexity, which I do think addresses some of the discussion, but are you feeling safe and comfortable with what you're showing now, both structurally and from a visual standpoint? This is not going to change?
Yeah.
Okay. That's really it for the questions that I have right now, other than, but yeah, I had clear questions on the planting plan. It just didn't seem like it was clear to me. So I'll leave it at that. Are there other questions for staff or the applicant, or do we want to go to public comment?
I'm prepared to go to public comment.
Okay. Okay, so we will now begin the public comment portion of this hearing. All questions and comments of this matter would be directed to the commission, not to the audience.
Chair, we have no public comments in chambers and no public comments on the Zoom.
Oh, okay. Is there a rebuttal?
No.
Oh, okay.
But my client has made it clear that he will accept whatever condition is placed upon us in relation to the rear of that sign. So I just wanted to make that clear.
In relation to what?
I'm sorry.
We couldn't quite hear you.
Couldn't quite hear what you said.
No, what I said is the client would accept any condition that has been placed on us in relation to that back of the sign. So if it's going to be trees, if it's going to be additional, whatever it's going to be,
Okay.
we're willing to accept.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other questions for the applicant or staff, or do we want to move to deliberation? Deliberations. Okay, anyone want to go first?
Yeah, I'll kick
Okay.
us off. I do think that there is a very robust discussion that should take place regarding the rear of the sign. There's been some options that have been presented graciously by the applicant. They include multiple different cabling options in the rear of the sign, and there's also some tree options to the rear of the sign. In Sassy, I did raise as a concern the view going into the city as a first impression of the gateway when you get closer than 175 feet. What that looks like for pedestrian, bicyclist, or a person traveling via automobile. I think that we should, as a body, probably have a discussion about the options that have been presented and make a recommended condition of approval to council if this were to move forward tonight. That way, we see that concern that's carried over from the design Sunset Arts and Advertising subcommittee is actually addressed.
I agree. I think it's an excellent idea. Is it worth just staying focused on that one item for a minute and seeing if anyone wants to weigh in?
Can I ask a question first?
Yes, question to staff? Or
Probably the architect can answer this better, because I'm trying to look for actual numbers here in the height of that lower section. Trying to get back to, these things are so hard to envision from the pedestrian viewpoint, from the car viewpoint, you know, is that at a height such as you're even going to see it, you know, what is, I don't have any of the little nice sideways markers that say how high that section is on any of my
Commissioner, are you asking about the billboard or the back?
back.
Oh.
So the back, the lower loop.
So the lower loop is it's like a little bit more than a third of the total height, which is 100 feet. So you're about 35 feet to the top of that loop, which roughly corresponds to sort of the canopy of the trees coming out of Beverly Hills, and then just kind of where your windscreen cuts off your field of view.
And the lower is what, 15? The
Are
bottom,
you-
the bottom of the sign is like 15?
Apologies to interject. Are you able to put the diagrams back up? I keep going to trying to find a page.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm looking at page 11.
It's good. That'd be good if it was on the screen for the public too.
Yeah, page 11.
Yeah, and I guess I understand there's that page, but also trying to remember what the options were with the things we were looking at, so.
Yeah,
Well, I was just, before we looked at the options, wanted to, just kind of think about it from the eye line level. What is a pedestrian looking at? If the bottom of that lower loop is 15 feet, not a lot of people walk around, looking that high up unless you have a way off distance perspective, which means you would have to be walking from somewhere in Beverly Hills, and frankly, not a lot of people do that. And then back to your point about the windscreen, and as we've all, driven or sat in the parking lot on Sunset Strip coming back into town, and, what do you see for how long? I mean, there are trees in Beverly Hills blocking this for quite a ways until you get pretty close to it. So I'm just trying to understand from precisely, because that's the benefit. The benefit is to the pedestrian and the person in the vehicle. So I'm trying to understand what they can and can't realistically see before we go to all this effort,
Well, once you get closer, then just to the project renderings and just based on personal experience, once you get to 175 feet, you can start to see the billboard. That's the first sign that from a pedestrian or an automobile perspective that you can start to see it.
So what we're talking about, if we look at the left image, the bottom, right where that 17 is, that's plus or minus 15 feet?
Yeah.
Okay. And the top, where the number 18 is
sort of
plus or
I'd say
minus
between
35
32
feet?
and 35 feet, yeah.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to give us a frame of reference before we went into all of these options.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. So I guess let's look at the options.
If we could put the screen up, Secretary Gillig, that was from the applicant's presentation containing the options variants.
I think that's my presentation.
Okay. So I'll go first if that's okay. Is everyone good with that? I'll
Yeah.
just provide my thoughts.
Just real quick though,
Sure.
the other option is just the tree, like the
trees.
next slide, right? So if we could see that too, just
Yeah.
to have the
Yeah.
full frame before you begin.
And isn't there an option of nothing?
Yeah.
To address the SASE concerns and kind of continued concerns of staff, we had already committed to some form of a cable mesh system,
Okay.
and then there were some questions prior
Or
to
the
this.
trees, right?
Yeah.
Is it and or the trees, or is it cable mesh or the trees?
Well, there really wouldn't be point to doing both.
Yeah.
I think, you could certainly plant something. It would just need to be small.
Smaller.
Smaller
Yeah.
to
Got it.
To be more of a shrub.
And then do we have this slide to Commissioner Solomon's point on the tree options? Okay. Just from my vantage point, for whatever it's worth, and just to get us started on discussion on this, when I looked at the cable options, I didn't really see any merit in the first one that was presented. I did see a little bit of interest in variant C that was presented, but I think that my personal preference would be to have a tree. But open to having a discussion about that. I do think that it is appropriate to have some sort of design feature, whether it be a tree or 2 trees in the back, or one of the variants of the cable meshing. So, I mean, that's just my opinion. I think that once you get closer than 175 feet, especially from a pedestrian vantage point, because you're not going 30 miles an hour, you're inclined to look at the back of this sign. So I think it would be appropriate to have something there to make it more aesthetically considerate.
Does anyone else want to?
You know, I'll just say the picture, I love the tree in the picture. I don't know what it will look like in real life. I actually did like the pattern mesh in the back. I don't feel strongly either way between the pattern mesh and the tree, as long as the tree does cover it. I'm happy to go with whatever the majority of the commission wants. I just feel like we need something there to make the back of the sign more attractive or obscured somehow. But I like variant B and C for the mesh. I did raise the question about, well, should it go higher than, like, what do we say, 30 feet there? You know, without actually being on the site right now and looking at it, I don't know if 30 feet is enough, but I'm interested to hear what my fellow commissioners have to say about it, but I could go either with variance B, C, or the tree if we think the tree will grow large enough.
Commissioner Jones?
Thanks. Yeah, I actually like the idea of there being cable mesh on the back without a tree. I'm not a tree hater. I appreciate trees, but I think there is some visual interest just insofar as kind of it is a sculptural form, and I think makes you wonder what's on the other side of it. I think it adds an interesting artistic element. Again, this is completely subjective. I can be swayed. I think at the end of the day, what I really want is just my dream whenever we're talking about these projects is for someone later to not be like, well, what idiot, approved this? Like, what does this look like? So I actually...
It's my worst nightmare.
Totally. So I actually really like B and C. But if there's more consensus for a tree, I'm fine with that. I think, this is not an organic looking form, so I don't know that I think it needs a tree there. But again, I can be swayed. From what I can see here, variants B and C are what I am aesthetically, drawn to. But that's my opinion.
Anyone else want to? Commissioner Solomon?
I obviously was not involved in the SASE deliberations, so I don't mean to besmirch, undermine anything that was said at that point. I do kind of think the concerns about the back of the sign are a little, in my opinion, overstated. I mean, given the sight lines that we've been provided, you can't hardly even see the thing until you get within 175 feet, and knowing that area of town, the other side of this building is single-family homes in Beverly Hills. This is not a pedestrian, I mean, there might be a sidewalk. This is not a pedestrian pathway. There's a bike lane on Santa Monica at the exact same point. This is not a bike pathway. This is going to be cars driving at 30 miles an hour. And I actually, not that my design opinion really cares, I think the design is beautiful, the simplicity of the loop, and I think the cable mesh kind of takes away from what I otherwise think is a design that stands for itself. I mean, the cable mesh looks like it's put up to hide something, and I don't think it should hide anything. So if it comes down to, if we're making a design choice tonight, I think that the tree without mesh is the easiest and simplest and blends in best with the canopy of the area, especially as you go into that Beverly Hills neighborhood, which is much more wooded than West Hollywood Sunset is.
Ben, can I ask you to, I think it's the previous page where you show what the, there we go, thank you. Okay. So, yeah, I didn't see this at SASE. So in looking at the original design, I can see exactly why SASE said the back needs a lot, something else going on.
Yeah.
And I really like what you did with it. I like how you introduced the two loops, and I like the resulting design. And I think that any cabling really takes away from the elegance of that line. I'm sorry, most of these designs, I'm having flashbacks to spirograph, which must be making me a little too young to remember. Which was actually very fun, but hey, it was a little toy that you had that you put a pencil in and it had wheels and it made these pictures. Okay, so having said that, if we were to do cabling, I would want it to really reinforce and somehow, really power up that structure that you've got there. I feel like the cabling choices just kind of diminish it. And I agree with Commissioner Solomon in that it just takes away from it. So I think it's important that we look at what was originally presented to SASE and say, well, yeah, I would totally agree with, yeah, that's not good enough.
Yeah.
But what they came back with is significantly better.
I didn't
Which
realize that-
option are you talking about, Commissioner Huppengarter? Just to
Original
clarify?
design on the left.
You're talking about the original design with nothing in the back?
Yeah. Well, and not the bottom loop.
And no bottom loop.
That's the important piece.
I agree.
Okay? So to me, I agree exactly with what you said at SASE, that what was there was insufficient because you did have this big blob. You had that big blob of gray in the back. But with the introduction of the secondary loop, it has much more balance and flow, and I think they've gone a long way to achieve breaking up that back. Could there be some way to introduce something else to further introduce something visually? I don't know what that is. Given a choice, I would go with the tree just because it would be a different element, not these strings trying to fight with the base of this design. And I think there's a way you could do maybe more of a shrub that wouldn't get so high as to entirely block that lower loop, yet introduce some greenery in that space, or maybe even just really beef up the plantings in that area at the bottom.
I agree. Yeah, I wasn't really sure, other than I didn't like some of the images on the right, and I liked some of the ones on the left more of the options, because I'm going to say something that I'm sorry, I apologize in advance, and I feel like no one's going to be able to unsee it once I say it, but a lot of the options to me looked like a broken spectacle from like the long view. So.
Oh wow, I'll never be able to unsee that.
So. I don't know. It makes.
That's a really good image.
Yeah. So to Commissioner Mato's point, and Huppengartner too, and well, all of us here, Commissioner Jones, I think we all said it. The idea of approving something that everyone's like, why is that? Sometimes it's good to keep things a little simple. And I was hung up on the tree because I thought it was in the way, but I think a lower tree could work. And really, if you do something in the loop, I keep going back to, I like the left one because if it was really an art installation and it was extremely understated and it was almost like translucent sort of cabling, then maybe that's a thing, but you have to get the right thing to do it. But I feel like I was gravitating toward that, or like a Gabrielle Dahl kind of a thing, because it felt in keeping with what you designed. But I think the loop made a huge improvement in and of itself. So maybe loop with some sort of planting is all you need.
I think a tree accomplishes a lot of different feats. One is, I know that there's a discussion around whether or not the tree replacement ordinance that had passed was before or after this was deemed approved. So that's one conversation, but you know, the fact that there's going to be tree removal for this, having another tree go in, and creating some sort of green landscape that matches the surrounding area as you enter the city, I think is a wise choice.
So just since we're spitballing here and coming up with ideas, in looking at this, because part of the whole design is the whole piece that comes down around the bottom, goes up around the front on the Sunset side. So if you increase the plantings there, then you start to obscure that base as well. So again, maybe the opportunity is to just beef up the plantings towards the back of the plinth, the elevation, and that would introduce more interest and greenery, introduce some minor, like breaking up just little teases over the edges of the metal without, you know, something big blocking the whole chunk of metal. Now that becomes a maintenance issue because keeping it that specific is, you know, a little bit trickier. But I think that there's ways to do that in a way that still highlights the beauty of the structure and the flow and the curve of the piece, because I like to look at it as an art piece, and without making it. I mean, you know me, I'll go with a tree any day, but I'll listen to my colleagues.
Yeah, and being cognizant of time, are we kind of aligning in a general sort of idea or direction? I know there's probably other things to discuss too.
Yeah, I just think that if we're going to move this forward tonight, that we should make a recommended condition of approval to council in line with one of these options as a body. Because, you know, I think that we all agree something needs to be, maybe not all of us, but I'll speak for myself. I think that something needs to be done in the back. I don't know exactly what it is. I think that the loop did help the project compared to what was presented at SASE. I agree with that. But I think that for us to move forward, I think that we should be making a recommendation in a condition, in the form of a condition of approval for council.
I mean, maybe it's just a quick straw poll if we all feel like we're kind of headed in that direction of like providing a direction such as.
Can I modify the straw? How many people are married to the various spider webs?
The various what?
Spider webs.
Who likes it? Like who wants to?
I think a tree is best, but I don't hate the spiral.
I would say too, I think it only needs to be one or the other.
Yeah.
Yeah, the tree.
And I'm fine with the tree.
Tree or some sort of planting.
So double loop and tree, is that?
Double
where
loop
we're
and
all-
tree.
The existing loop, no
Yeah.
mesh, tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're in agreement?
Yes.
Then I'll make a motion.
Oh, wait, do we want to discuss other items?
Oh,
or
do we have,
good?
sorry, do we have other things to discuss?
Yeah.
Oh,
I think so.
Oh, no. If we're good, we're good.
We're okay with a motion.
I mean, I know you were speaking before we took this detour, which I think was necessary, Commissioner Matos, so you probably had more to say. I have a couple of things, but it's good to know we're headed in that direction.
I would just ask staff to read what condition of approval we would be voting on before we make a motion.
Yeah, and I think some added clarity might be helpful. I do think probably that condition 2.1, which is the project description, we could add a sentence at the end consistent with applicant's offer to accept a condition regarding the back of the sign. And to Commissioner Hoopengardner's point, there was a desire for sort of, I thought I heard existing loop or tree, but I think a little more clarity for sort of an enforceable condition would be helpful. But I do think it could be added to condition 2.1.
I could take a stab at it. I think the structure as presented in this meeting versus the structure that was presented in SASE is the preferred structure of the body. Point 1.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then point 2 would be
Removal of the mesh.
no mesh, and then the tree. A tree or tree or two planted on the backside of this sign.
It needs to be one tree.
Okay.
Two would be out of balance. Two is
Okay, I just saw
anti-asymmetry.
their options had one. Their options that they presented had one tree or two trees. That's why I was saying one or two trees.
It's a design principle.
Yeah.
If you put two trees, you lose one tree.
Okay, one tree.
So I have that the structure as presented, and just in the spirit of spitballing as the commission's doing, the structure as presented on the conceptual renderings presented on November 7th, 2024 will be included on the back of the billboard. On the back of the billboard sign faces with the cable mesh system removed and one tree planted.
Yeah,
You know, you could maybe condition it in a way without getting too crazy, but we said that's 32 to 35 feet at the top, and we don't want to block the top of the loop because you want to see that structure. So maybe you say, you know, a tree that plus or minus gets to 20 feet in height on average or something is a way to...
I get what you're saying. I don't want to get too prescriptive with the
Well,
tree.
but it's important we just spent a lot of time on it. I think it's important that we are clear because they could plant a tree that goes to 40 feet and then you've got something that just completely wipes out the backside. So I think saying something that goes to a maximum of, you know, 25 feet in height, now you've got something that sort of fits, is framed into that lower loop. If the top is 35, the treetop goes to 25, now it sort of fits nicely in a picture frame of that lower loop.
Does the body have any preference?
I guess there could be some sort of
My whole thing is that it's not an exact science here, so if we say 25 feet and it's really 45 feet or something, then...
No, but there are trees that will not ever get to 45 feet. There are trees that will never be above 15 feet. The idea is to plant a species that by its nature is going to get to 20 to 25 feet. And that's the maximum amount of the prescription I'm talking about. And if you go to any gardening book, they will tell you this is the average size, this is the average size. It's easy to do. So a tree of maximum 20 to 25 feet in height that would fit.
A tree of sufficient size that shall not be more than whatever height at mature.
At mature height.
Of proportional height.
Mature height is, you know, maximum 20, 25 feet that now becomes framed by that lower loop.
I like the use of the word proportional.
Yeah, I think we should just say a
I don't-
tree of
I don't feel
proportional height
comfortable
to the
assigning-
billboard.
Yeah, I don't feel comfortable assigning a specific height to it. I think proportional.
Yeah, and my concern isn't the maximum height of the tree, Commissioner Hoopen-Gardner. It's just that we're looking at plans and they're spitballing, oh, it's between 30 and 32 feet. You know, we don't really know exactly what that is. I just think
Then if
we're doing a condition, it should be a proportional
you're fine
height.
with proportional, then I would say that its maximum height is 2/3 of the lower loop.
Did you have something to say?
Well, I was just going to suggest that we could just state that the maximum or mature height of the tree on the back side shall be below the top of the loop. So that way you don't have to be prescriptive and say whether it's 25 feet or 35 feet, just so that the maximum height is below the top of the loop.
I understand that. So yeah, I'm fine with that. As long as it keeps it is proportional to the loop size, loop height, loopage. I'm getting loopy.
Yeah. Okay. So do we have language?
I can try, and I'll look to Mr. Vu as well. But I think we've got close to a consensus.
Yeah.
So an added sentence at the bottom, at the end of section 2.1, that says the back of the billboard structure will be as presented on the conceptual renderings presented on November 7, 2024, with the cable mesh system removed and with one tree planted with a maximum height that will be below the top of the loop.
Sure. Everyone feel good about it?
And then the other thing I would maybe suggest is just with direction from the Planning Commission to include a rendering with the council agenda materials.
Absolutely. That would be great. I think that council should be seeing this and the public should be noticed in advance, not at the meeting.
Yeah, I mean, I just have a point, I brought it up before, point of clarity in the sign permit, but at page 4, the proposed billboard does not include architectural lighting, but they just presented on that. So I would just take that sentence out.
Chair Lombardi, I want to make sure I get that correctly. So on the sign resolution,
Page 4 of
page
12.
4,
D, the first sentence.
okay, so the request is to delete the sentence that says the proposed billboard does not include architectural lighting as defined by the billboard policy?
I think so, yeah, based on what they presented. Am I missing something?
I'm comfortable either way with the removal of the sentence.
It just seems like it doesn't jive with what they presented.
We strike D.
Lighting that is used to uplight the billboard, which is what they did present, the second sentence.
I'm comfortable because there are the conditions of approval regarding the lighting standards and consistency with the advertising plan baked in.
Are there any other discussions or points that wanted to be covered by anyone? Obviously, there was a general cleanup of the resolutions, and I hope that those can be picked up. But otherwise, maybe we're headed toward a motion.
Yeah, I just want to do note and thank staff. This format where the SASSY's feedback was kind of synthesized point by point, and then with bullets that enumerated how those were being addressed was really helpful. So thank you.
I will second that. That was a really excellent way to present it. Thank you.
But yeah, I'm inclined to move this forward.
I will second Commissioner Jones's motion.
Okay, and just
I thought he had one already.
Oh, and one point of clarification. So we've got the removal of that sentence from the sign permit, the added condition, and I just wanted to ensure for our motion makers, we also included staff's clerical corrections that were included in the record.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, including all the numbering corrections.
Yes, the formatting will be, to Commissioner Hoopengarner's point, the formatting will be cleaned up in the pagination for the council hearing.
Okay, and the small building?
Yeah, those were yeah, exactly. I think that generally all of the items that were flagged,
I mean,
there were a lot of them.
And so, and back to the 25%, the fact that that is just for the period of correction and not for the term of the agreement? Because that language there just is not enforceable.
So, Commissioner Hoopengarner, I think on that point, what would be most appropriate would probably be if there's a specific request to clarify a term. I believe that was respect to the occupancy threshold. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the best option would be if there's direction from the commission on that term to clarify something to make a component of that more clear, we would send that up to the council.
Well, I guess the first question is what was the deal point? And I think what Brian said is the deal point was that the increase was only during the cure period? Or is it for the life of the contract?
The cure period.
Okay, because that's not what it says.
We'll clarify that.
So clarification regarding the cure period as it respects to the occupancy?
The end of that first sentence that goes on for like 10 lines, okay, and ends with 25%.
Okay, so if the commission's amenable, there would also be a direction to send up to the council to clarify regarding the cure period as it results to the building occupancy section.
No. The fact that the benefit increased to 25% is only during the cure period. During the period when the occupancy is not met, the public benefit payments shall be increased by 25%. So you need to change that to say, during the public benefit, I don't know, it's very messy.
And for that reason, I think the clarification as a recommendation from the commission for that deal point is best as part of what goes up to council.
I mean, it should be a whole separate sentence, first of all, from the whole first bit. And the first bit should be tighter, and then that fact that 25% only applies during the period of substandard occupancy needs to be clarified, because this doesn't say that. And I would say that that's an important point. Okay, did we get the whole question about who pays for the removal? On page 29.
So part of the recommendation can be to clarify to Mr. League, who's jotting down notes, to clarify the substandard occupancy conditions under the building occupancy section.
And that under the removal at the end of the term.
And the obligations and responsibilities with respect to removal of the permitted sign.
And yeah, who pays for it? And if they're in bankruptcy, how is that recouped? If the city has to spend the money?
Or we could lien the property.
Well, that was my question earlier. If a lien could be enforced,
And I think
as relates to a billboard.
if that's part of the Planning Commission recommendation up to the council, that information could be included in the materials for council.
Absolutely. We need to protect the city. That would be my recommendation, if my colleagues agree.
You're on page 29.
I'm on page 29 at the top, general provisions, removal of permitted sign.
So you're talking about a clarification that it is the responsibility of the owner of the sign to remove it.
To remove it, and if they don't.
At cost.
If they don't, and the city has to pay for it, how the city is going to recoup the costs of removal.
I think you can solve just by saying at owner's expense.
How?
Whether it's not the city that has to do it itself because they're bankrupt, it's still going to be at the expense of the owner, which then they would place a lien on the property.
If that's doable, and that was my question earlier, is it a lienable correction?
Staff would need to check that. So I do think if the commission's amenable, we do have direction from the commission as part of the council materials that would address both the substandard occupancy clarification and the question of who pays for the removal of the permitted sign, as well as the commission's interested in ensuring that's not borne by the city.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, that's good.
And then I think, Brian, there was the other one about the...
Commissioner Jones, you're good with that?
I'm sorry?
You're good with the staff
Yeah,
recommendation
totally.
on that? Okay.
Yep.
Oh, Lord. Where was the other one? Page 19. Oh, yes, the site improvements, about the consequences. Consequences
On the maintenance.
on the maintenance. In other words, that the city wouldn't have to resort to default proceedings to enforce the site improvements, and having some consequences and some steps.
Maybe
You know,
the
like-
idea, if we put them on notice and then the revenue is increased by 25%.
There you go.
Until the site's brought back in.
Perfect.
into conformance.
Because then it's consistent with the other components.
Okay. So, motion maker and second,
Yeah.
which the maker was Commissioner Jones, seconded by Matos.
I'm good to move.
Okay.
All right, and maybe just for the record, so we have, just to reiterate, because we've had a couple comments since the motion and second came in, so we had the removal of the sentence of architectural lighting under subsection D on the sign policy. We had the added sentence read into the record, excuse me, with respect to the back of the billboard structure. We had the clerical edit staff recommended, and then we had direction and clarification that will go up to City Council from the Planning Commission with respect to DA terms associated with substandard occupancy. information about who pays for removal of the permitted sign, and also information regarding site improvements and potential notice.
Perfect.
Yes, aligned.
Okay. So we have a motion, second. Motion's been clarified. Any further discussion before we vote? Looks like we're ready. Thank you.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes and 1 recusal by Commissioner Carvalero. There is no appeal process. The following resolutions: PC 24-1576 as amended, resolution number PC 241577 as presented, PC resolution number 241575 as amended is going forward to the City Council.
Thank you. Okay, item 11, new business. 11A, discussion of meeting dates for Planning Commission and subcommittees for calendar year 2025.
I just have one question about this item, if I may. We received an email from Secretary Gillig about a potential joint study session on February 24th. It's a Monday, in tandem with council. And I know that there was going to be discussion about that at that October 21st council meeting. Is that moving forward? And if so, can we add it to the calendar?
Yes, it is moving forward, and we can include that on the calendar officially.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay.
And the only other date that staff was in consideration for was the optional Passover, April 17th. If the commission has any thoughts on that, or just keep the meeting open.
What do you normally do?
It's a religious holiday, so it's up to you if you want to honor that. If there's anybody on the commission that will be.
Well, I think more than the commission, we need to honor the community.
What was that?
I think more than the commission and their calendars, we should honor the community. And if it's a
Yeah.
holiday, we should not be meeting.
Yeah, I think if it's a Passover holiday, that we should observe that and honor it, in my opinion.
I agree.
Okay, sounds like there's consensus there.
It's also the Thursday before Easter, so I feel like it's just kind of people tend to travel and stuff. I think it's just best.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, noted. We're officially canceled April 17th then, and then all the other dates will stand.
And because Commissioner Jones, you brought it up, the joint session, I just want to note again, I know I mentioned it earlier, I think that the time was 6 p.m. I know we're used to 6:30 p.m. here, so just a mental note, it's also a little earlier as the date approaches.
And is that the 17th or the 24th, David?
The joint session
Yeah.
is the 24th.
The 24th.
24th, okay, thank you.
17th was the April 17th Passover. Okay. Do we need to formally vote on this? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Is anyone ready or prepared to make a motion?
I'll move it.
I'll second.
Okay, motion.
With the cancellation of the April 17th meeting and the addition of the February 24th joint study session with City Council.
Yes, confirmed. And who made the second? I'm sorry, Commissioner
Erickson.
Erickson?
Sorry,
Matos.
Eric.
I'm
Matos.
getting late here. Wow.
It happens all the time.
Motion maker was Jones and Matos seconded.
And the motion passes, noting 6 ayes and 1 recusal from Commissioner Carvalero, approving the 2025 Planning Commission meeting dates along with the subcommittee dates for the 2025 calendar year.
Okay, item 12, unfinished business. We have no items. Same for item 13, excluded consent calendar, no items. Item 14, items from staff, planning managers, update, which we could take at the same time as the subcommittee.
Yes, so in terms of the commission's future agendas, As you know, the November 21st meeting is canceled for the West Hollywood Day State of the Community event. So at the commission's and following our next meeting would occur on December 5th. And on that date, there will be a public hearing for the zone text amendment for the EV charging site and EV service station. There will also be a public hearing for another ZTA. This is for the ADU housing bills. This is the non-urgency ordinance that Tahira mentioned earlier today. Also, there is a public hearing, and this is a housing project at 845 San Vicente Boulevard. It's associated with the San Vicente bungalows. And then the final item on December 5th, as of today, there is a public hearing for the billboard at 8433 Sunset Boulevard, which is the Comedy Store. So for December 19th, we are exploring the possibility of having an item at this time, but so stay tuned for that. And that would be it for this calendar year. Beginning in 2025, the January 2nd meeting has been canceled. That would be followed by, on January 16th, you will have a public hearing for another zone text amendment. This is regarding the ministerial housing permit and legislative bills, followed by a public hearing for yet another zone text amendment for shared housing. And at this time, we anticipate that we'll be able to take the public hearing for the Pacific Design Center's amendment to you on January 26th. And then, as obviously, as we've mentioned several times, February 24th, that would be the joint study with the City Council regarding development agreements. So that's what is in the horizon for your regular Planning Commission meeting. In terms of subcommittees.
Really quick, just
Yes.
before we jump, December 19th, noting that there could be a meeting, it's probably a good time if there's any issues or concerns. We're aware of that now. Anyone?
Yeah, I will not be in town. I will be traveling for work, and I actually talked to Jennifer about it a little earlier. Unfortunately, I just found that out this week, so.
Okay.
I'm currently scheduled to be out of town then. I leave the day before.
Okay. We can check with Commissioner Carvalero. I believe he said earlier that he was aware, but looks like we would have 2 commissioners absent.
In question about that, given that it's a late edition and we've made travel plans, if you go ahead with the meeting and I'm unable to make it, is it an excused absence, or does it count against the absence policy that's in place now?
I mean, that falls on a regular meeting date, so I would assume that it would be considered an unexcused absence. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so moving on to subcommittees. As of right now, there is nothing on the calendar for the long-range planning subcommittee. And with regard to the design review subcommittee, there are no meetings for the rest of this calendar year, but on January 23rd of 2025, there potentially would be a 401 North Robertson, which is a mixed-use project. It's also a density bonus housing project, so that potentially could come to the design review subcommittee on January 23rd, 2025. And that is what I have for the foreseeable future.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, well then item 15 is public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on general items?
What do you say, Wendy?
Chair, we have no public comments.
Okay. Any items for commissioners?
I have an item.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. I want to congratulate our new Associate Director, Jennifer Alkire, on her promotion. Working with you has been an absolute joy. Your knowledge, your professionalism, your courtesy, your kindness, your willingness to take calls after 5 p.m. Everything that you do is so greatly appreciated, and it really great to see a fellow alum of the Central Valley of California step into a leadership role in this city. So thank you for everything you do, and congratulations.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to say congratulations, Jennifer. You're going to have your hands full, but I know you're fully capable of it. Have fun.
Yes, also congratulations. I know I felt like I had a steep learning curve when I joined the commission, and your wealth of knowledge, you seem to always know what to say and have an answer to everything. So I'm really excited for you and want to say congratulations.
Well, I'm not going to not say it now. Congratulations, Jennifer. You've been incredibly welcoming to me as I've joined and tried to learn as much and met with me. We've had lunch outside of office hours, and it's been a pleasure getting to know you, and I'm glad that you'll be in this new role.
And I mean, I'm not going to be left out of this. Jennifer always passes the vibe check and brings sanity and clarity to our proceedings here, and has since I joined. So mazel, and very much looking forward to working with you and continuing to work with you in your new and expanded role. Very well deserved, by the way.
Great, thank you so much. Then that's our last item, so I will now adjourn this meeting. Our next regularly scheduled meeting is Thursday, December 5th, noting that the next meeting in November is canceled because of the West Hollywood anniversary. So Thursday, December 5th, 6:30 p.m. here at Council Chambers is our next regular meeting. Thank you.